Hello everyone. Welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So, before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. 79-year-old Avenel Cowgill was a Texas native and had spent most of her life in East Dallas. She had lived on Elliewood Drive for 50 years, and since losing her husband Jim in 2009, she was now living alone. She had two daughters, Patty and Janet, who both lived out of town, and she was also a doing great grandmother. Avenel kept herself busy volunteering, donating to charity, and helping at her church, something she was very passionate about. Her fellow members said, "You couldn't have met a kinder person. She would have given you the shirt off her back and did everything she could to help out anyone who needed it." The church had become a second family for her, and the bond they all shared was very close. She was a fantastic cook and became well known for her baking, specifically her cookies, and she would often bring them in big batches for everyone to enjoy. She spent March 7th volunteering at her church. Nothing out of the ordinary, mainly answering the phone in the office as well as putting together some flyers. She left at 3:30 p.m. and made a stop at a local store before heading home. Her daughter said her usual evening routine was relaxing in front of the TV and working on her crochet. Charity was never far from her mind, and she would often spend her evenings making hats that she would donate to the homeless. March 9th was a cold and rainy day. Janet hadn't heard from her mother at all and phoned her to remind her to put the clocks forward an hour that night. Avenel and her daughter spoke every day, but this time the usual impromptu response from her never came. Perhaps she had just stayed out later at the church. Her daughter thought later that night, however, Janet got a call off her sister. Patty was hoping Janet had heard from their mom, as Patty hadn't heard anything for 2 days. A feeling of panic set in straight away, and they called authorities and requested a welfare check. Officers arrived at Avenel's home at around 11 p.m. They knocked on the door several times, but they too were met with silence. A stack of newspapers was sat on the front porch, and after a walk around the building, they noticed the back door was wide open. The lights and television were still on, and her knitting materials were next to her armchair. The officers turned off the television and called out her name. As they walked into the kitchen and dining area, they found her face down in a pool of blood on the floor. She had been beaten and had severe blunt force trauma. It was clear that she had been dead for a few days. Her purse ID along with some of her jewelry and coin collection were missing. Her kitchen bin had been emptied, and there was a wooden stool near her body which had blood on it. There were no signs of a forced entry, indicating she could have known the person or people and let them in without any concern. And after the attack happened, they ran out the back door. But being 79 years old, 5 feet 3 inches, and very petite, it was also entirely possible that she had opened the door before being completely overpowered. Homicide Detective Scott Sears was handed the case and arrived there just after midnight. Janet was still holding out hope and ringing her mother's phone, praying she would suddenly pick up and have some simple explanation. Detective Sears answered the phone and broke the awful news. Two rewards totaling $15,000 were offered up and police started going door to door and furious over the murder of a 79-year-old woman, neighbors say. Everyone loved. Police got a call to check on Avenel Cowgill at her home last night on Elliewood Drive. But when officers arrived at her home, they found her body. NBCV's Mark Schneider talked to neighbors and police who joins us live. And Mark, police really need help on this case. They could use some help. They've got no witnesses and they don't even know when Miss Cowgill died, although they say it was recently. They say when they got there, the back door was wide open, which leads them to believe this was a burglary. It's obvious there's still a lot police know. In this case, Amanda, all right, Mark Schneider live in her family could think of no one who would have wanted to hurt her. She held no grudges and was well loved and respected in her community. None of her neighbors recalled seeing or hearing anything. This then made the police think that whoever her killer was most likely got in via the back door, as this was far less noticeable. The police now believe that she was killed either Thursday night or early Friday. Her body was discovered at the house on Saturday and the police are hoping this $15,000 reward will attract some clues to solve this case. Neighbors here say they don't remember seeing or hearing anything suspicious in recent days, but Jerry Calder says he'd love to be able to recall something that could help police. Things that go bump in the night, you don't get scared that they're the boogeyman or something. You just don't go out and check every little thing that could be going on. When something like this happens, it makes you second guess. I need to be keeping an eye on things that go on. I was just blown away. It was just a heartbreaking thing. It's just the sweet old lady that lives down here and never heard her fly. Just this terrible, terrible, tragic thing. The last time anyone remembers hearing from Cowgill was Thursday, but on this street where nothing ever happens, not seeing her Friday or Saturday didn't set off any alarm bells. I just see her pick up the paper every morning, you know, and I hadn't seen her in a few days, but that was the only thing I could say. She was the sweetest woman in the world. She was known for her cookies. She was great. You know, if it would have been a natural cause, it would be so different. But when you think about somebody broken in, I couldn't imagine how she felt. She would have given anyone anything they wanted. And for her to invade her home, take her life, unbelievable. Fortunately, her house phone had several voicemails from her bank. The fraud department had called her a day after police believed she had been killed. Attempts had been made on her credit cards that had flagged up straight away. An attempt to withdraw money had been made at an ATM at 11 p.m. the day she was last seen alive. The footage from the ATM was grainy and blurred, but it confirmed it was most definitely not Avenel using her own cards and further supported their thoughts that she had been killed on the 7th. A few hours later, just after 2:30 a.m., a successful purchase had been made at a Walmart on Forest Lane, just a 10-minute drive from her home. Fortunately, Walmart was full of cameras and open 24/7, so officers were quickly able to take a look at the footage. The cameras showed what looked like the same man that had been at the ATM, and he can be seen pushing a shopping cart around the aisles. He then heads to the tills and attempts to make a purchase. The card is declined, and he walks away. A few minutes later, however, he returns and walks back into the electronics aisle where he picks up an iPad. He swipes one of Avenel's cards. And this time it's successful. After this, he calmly leaves the store. At 5 a.m., Avenel's credit cards had another attempt made on them at a different Walmart around 20 m away. Although the man had changed his clothes, it was definitely the same person. He walks to the till and attempts to purchase a laptop and an Xbox 360. The card declines several times before he gives up and leaves empty-handed. He puts his hood up before walking through the parking area towards a Whataburger restaurant 5 minutes away. While he was walking over, a silver gold car was sat outside the restaurant. Another man gets out of the car and goes into the Whataburger. He collects his order and heads back out to the car before driving away. The man from Walmart then enters the restaurant's car park. He paces around for a while before the same silver car pulls up. He gets inside and they drive off. Although the license plate of the car could not be made out, the men weren't being discreet and were leaving a clear digital footprint for the police to follow. Sirs and his team were closing in and they announced to the media it wouldn't be long before these men were caught. They just needed that little bit more. On March 15th, Avenel was laid to rest. Right now, family and friends are gathering for the funeral of a 79-year-old murder victim, but police hope her killers won't be free for much longer. Her daughter said it was standing room only because so many people wanted to be there and say their goodbyes. Family and friends said although it was a beautiful day, remembering her, it was overshadowed by the anger, frustration, and fear people felt. Authorities released the CCTV and the footage quickly started flooding the media. Police want to talk to you about a Dallas murder case. Officers say the man in the blue cap used Colgill's credit cards during this trip to the store, hoping that new pictures and video will provide new leads to help capture her killer. Help them catch whoever did this to that poor woman. I mean, it's just awful that this has happened. So, I'm very glad that, this has come out. I just can't believe they killed her. I mean, she would have gave him her purse. They didn't have to do that. Right now, police are not calling them the killers, but say they want to talk to the men about how they got Colgill's car. And here's a look at the car the men were seen driving. An older silver 4-door compact car missing a back right hubcap. If you have any information about those men, call police. There's also a $15,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. As the public started trying to help identify the two men, Detective Sirs was focusing on the iPad and sent a search warrant to Apple. They had a serial number and model and hoped Apple would be able to determine if the iPad had connected to Wi-Fi. From this, they obtained 3 addresses, one of which was a resale store called Entertain Mart. In order to process any sales, the store requests ID. Fortunately for Sirs and his team, Entertain had taken the iPad and finally a name could be put to the face. It was 28-year-old Daniel Brooks, a known heroin user who had had run-ins with the law before. Daniel had just been arrested in the city of Richardson, just several miles away from the scene of the crime in Ellwood Drive. He, along with a man named David Heron, had been arrested for attempting to steal an elderly lady's purse. David Heron fit the description of the man ordering the food and driving away with Daniel. David and Daniel had gone to school together. David had graduated from university with a degree in creative writing before going through several stints in treatment centers for his heroin dependency. Daniel soon lost his job as a veterinary assistant and started using heroin too. He would fall deeper into his addiction, later losing his apartment and began living with David in David's car. The two men were still being held in Richardson, and Sears and his team headed over to bring them back for questioning. In a parking spot outside, police found the car and it was evident that the men had been living in it for some time. Detective Sears was in charge of the interviews and started with David. He said he thought David would be easier to break and get the truth from. During his first interview, David admitted to letting Daniel borrow his car with the intention of robbing someone's house to get money to buy heroin. Daniel thought this was the easiest way to get money, but David was reluctant, having lost his mother when she was strangled during a home invasion. He said he was also worried someone might be at home. It was mid to late afternoon at the time and still very light outside. Daniel decided to go through with it alone and said he would meet David once he had got what he needed. He took David's car and left him at a nearby Walgreens for about an hour. When Daniel returned, David said he noticed items in the car that were not there before. He also recalled that Daniel was no longer wearing the same clothes. Daniel appeared visibly upset and agitated, dry heaving, and then throwing up. Although Daniel told him the house he robbed was empty, David said his demeanor wasn't matching up with that and it was clear something terrible had happened. Detective Sears then moved on to Daniel. In Daniel's interview, he admitted to using her credit cards, but said he had been given them by a dealer called Justin. He denied killing her and said he hadn't been in her house at any point. After this, he asked for a lawyer and the interview was terminated. There was no DNA of either of the men found in Avenel's home or on any of the clothes they had seized so far. And Detective Sears was starting to fear they might not get enough to issue a capital murder charge. But a week later, on March 28, David's second interview got underway. And in the presence of a lawyer, he gave a new and very different story. He said Daniel had admitted to talking his way into Avenel's home by telling her he had lost his dog and needed help. Once inside, Daniel said he had started threatening her before stealing her things. David said he had asked Daniel if anything had gone wrong while he was in the house, but Daniel said all he'd done was scare her. Daniel proceeded to change out of his boots into a pair of white tennis shoes. David remembered seeing something that looked like blood on the boots, but he didn't ask any questions. Police hadn't yet checked these boots, but they happened to be the boots Daniel was wearing when he was booked into custody. They hoped that David was right and this would definitely put Daniel inside Avenel's home. David said after this they made the trips to Walmart and slept in the car for a few hours before going to Entertain Mart, where Daniel got $440 for the iPad. They then drove to a pawn shop in Oak Cliff to get some money for Avenel's jewelry, antique coins, her purse, and some silverware. Daniel changed his clothes again before he entered, something which the cameras inside the shop confirmed. He pawned the stolen coins for $40 before they arranged to meet a dealer called Cassie and bought a large amount of heroin. They used the rest of the cash to pay for a motel in Oklahoma City. That night, David wrote in his diary, "No coming back. In the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, from around the bend, the train is coming while my feet rest securely on the tracks. A sinking ship with no captain. This is ultimate sin. A day later, all the heroin was gone, and they returned to Dallas because they didn't know any drug dealers in Oklahoma City. Every bit of David's story was checking out and was backed up by the CCTV. And fortunately for the investigating officers, the test results were now back from Daniel's boots. They were positive for Avenel's blood. After David's car had been towed and examined, her driver's license was discovered inside. Great to NBC5, Eric's King, who is live at Dallas Police Headquarters. So, Eric, what else have you learned about this tonight? Well, actually, they're saying 2 people are behind bars for this. Let's get straight to the video because a number of people are saying this is very rare for Dallas police to give us this kind of access. You're looking at a video of 28-year-old Daniel Brooks. We just shot this minutes ago. He's one of 2 men charged with capital murder for the death of 79-year-old Avenel Colgill. Now, the second person, his name is David Heron. He's 29 years old. He's in the hospital right now with non-life-threatening injuries. No clarity given from Metro Police on exactly what those injuries were and what they were caused by. He too is charged with capital murder. Now, both men are being held on $1 million bonds, respectively. They were arrested by Dallas police in conjunction with Richardson police back on March the 20th on unrelated charges. It was a brutal murder. It was clearly irresponsible in this dastardly deed. We don't know why they took a life of a grandmother. So again, the why question keeps coming up. We ask that of Dallas police. They certainly are keeping that information close to the vest right now. They say the 2 suspects have been interviewed, but as far as the motive, they're simply not releasing that. Just to reiterate, again, when we talk capital murder, that capital murder charge comes when the murder is done in conjunction with another crime. In this case, that has to deal with the theft of the electronics and the theft of the debit card or credit card. But at the very least, we know that 2 people are in custody tonight. One of which in the hospital. One here at Dallas Police Headquarters being charged with capital murder. We're live in Dallas. I'm Eric King, NBC5. Alright. Thank you, Eric. The charge against David was soon dropped due to insufficient evidence and he was charged with burglary instead. David entered a plea of guilty and was sentenced to 5 years behind bars. Daniel Brooks entered a plea of not guilty and a trial got underway. His defense team argued that Daniel's intention was to rob the house in question, but when he went in, he found her already dead inside. The defense also said that the blood on the boots was a transfer stain and had come from walking around her body and brushing against it, not from attacking her. His lawyer laid the blame firmly on David, saying he was the creator, the writer, the director, and the main actor in this travesty. Unfortunately for the police, prosecution, and family, too, many jury members had doubts. On June 11, 2014, after a 5-day trial, the jury was in a deadlock, resulting in a mistrial. Prosecutors would not take this lying down, however, and found an expert specialized in blood splatter analysis. His experience and knowledge confirmed that the blood was not a transfer stain. The blood was in motion at the time it hit his boot, pointing to him being her killer. Daniel was raindicked and again entered a plea of not guilty. This time, thanks to the hard work of the prosecutors and their new blood splatter evidence, he was found guilty of capital murder. In Texas, capital murder is punished with either a life sentence without parole or the death penalty. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole. Daniel's legal team filed a motion for a new trial which was overruled in 2017. They then filed a challenge to the overruling, saying there were issues with the evidence and how it had been presented in court. The true crime TV show, The First 48, covers the case as it was happening as part of an episode. Daniel's lawyer argued that the episode didn't present anything fairly and this could have impacted the trial if anyone had watched it. But this was also overruled and the judgment was affirmed. After a passing, Janet said her last box of cookies was still in the church. No one wanted to eat the last one. Janet said she talks to her mother all the time, telling her about her day and asking for her advice. I sometimes just need her to be there to talk me through it all and give me a hug, she said. Avenel Cowgirls pastor said she will always be remembered as someone that cared deeply for others and would have done anything for anyone. Story 2, Tennessee. Just over an hour south of Nashville, the residents of Toma describe it as quaint and quiet. Most people know each other and the community is fairly close. In 2012, it was home to 24-year-old Erica Megan Sharpton. Erica went by Megan and she was part of a big family who had moved around a bit before settling in. She was a hard worker, very goal-oriented, and her best friend said she was really funny, outgoing, and always pushed herself in every way. Megan was just 2 months away from graduating, and had a promising career in the nursing field ahead of her. She was always busy but thrived in that environment, enjoying her part-time jobs, waiting tables at a local steakhouse, as well as another at a nursing home. She was living with her partner of 3 years, Chris, and everyone said she had everything going for her in so many ways. On July 1st, Megan had made plans to go to her mother's house to see her sister, who was visiting from out of town. But soon after making dinner plans, Megan called her mother, Kelly, and explained that a last-minute job interview had come up and she would have to reschedule. Megan was excited and said she would even be getting an upfront payment straight away if she was lucky enough to get the job. A hard-working person, always looking to progress. Her family were just as excited. They wished her luck and agreed to catch up with her later. But hours would pass and neither her family, friends, or her partner Chris had heard anything about the interview. Megan was completely silent and wasn't answering her phone. Before long, it was past midnight and into the next day, and people were starting to worry. Whether the interview had gone well or not, they were hoping for her to tell them something. July 2nd, 2012, 1:20 a.m. It had been a very hot and dry day, and in the early morning hours, a couple of teenagers driving down Ival Road happened upon a fire in amidst the trees. It was a very secluded and unfrequented area. The nearest building was a church about half a mile away, and the nearest home was way across the bridge. This wasn't a road you would have any reason to stop on. It was more just a place to pass through. The teens called emergency services thinking a forest fire had broken out, and they were worried it would spread. Authorities got there not long after and quickly started combating the fire. which had spread quite a distance. Perhaps it was a campfire that had been left unattended or a discarded cigarette, the first responders thought. But they didn't have to get very close to realize it was far from that. The fire had been set to try and burn a body. The body of Megan Sharpton. There was no car nearby, and no one else was around. Megan had no ID, no keys, no purse, and no phone on her or anywhere near her. She was naked from the waist down, and the location and position of the fire confirmed that she was already dead before she was set on fire. One of the officers commented on how severe the blunt force trauma to her head was, as they could see how dented her skull was. Along with no identification, there had been no people recently reported missing they could look towards for an answer. But her distinctive t-shirt indicated she was a medical student and she had several tattoos. So, police were able to put somewhat of a description out. Word traveled fast, and after seeing a Facebook post about a girl with star tattoos being found, Kelly had called him. Megan had star tattoos on her ankle representing her siblings, as well as one on her neck. And from these alone, Kelly knew straight away it was her daughter. It was brutal, shocking, and the community was left incredibly frightened as a result. Sheriff Tim Fuller says deputies discovered Sharpton's body in this grass on fire early Monday morning. After putting out the flames, they discovered evidence of trauma to her head. It appears to us that she may have very well been murdered at another location and was literally dumped here to dispose of the body. Had she been killed on the way home from the interview? Had she even made it to the interview in the first place? Was the interviewer her killer, or was it a totally unrelated attack? Joining us now is Kelly Sharpton. I'm sure this has just been so difficult for you and your family. Our prayers go out to you. How did you find out what happened to your beautiful daughter? I actually read a post on Facebook where they had described a girl with a star tattoo on the back of her neck and one on her foot, and I knew that it was her. When was the last time you talked to your daughter, and what kind of mood was she in? I understand. She was saying that she was going to go over and visit a family. Correct? Right. My other daughter was here from out of town, and she had just woken up at 3:45 that afternoon. She'd worked the late shift at the restaurant where she worked and was planning to come over after that. She said after she got her shower she would come on, and she didn't come, but we were under the understanding she had an interview with somebody to start sitting with an elderly lady. And so we just figured she had gone on and gone to that interview, but we lost track of her after that. If somebody is out there listening tonight and they saw something, what would you like to say to them as you are desperately searching for clues for your daughter? Just please, if you saw anything, even the smallest details, please call the police. Call TBI or Franklin County Sheriff's Department. They've been wonderful. They've kept us up to date. They've left no stone unturned. They've just been great. And please call. She was our daughter and our sister. We just miss her. Police started with the people closest to her, one of which was her partner, Chris, and her family admitted. They did briefly question him, too. The couple had been on and off for a while, and her sister had said her first thought was that he had been involved, describing the couple as oil and water, and most definitely having their ups and downs. Chris told investigators the last time he had tried to call her, she didn't answer. When she didn't come back to the apartment that night, he just assumed she had slept at her mother's. A search of the apartment found blood in the bathroom along with some needles, and this was enough to pull both Chris and his roommate Robbie in for more questions. As they were interviewing the pair, Megan's 1995 red Ford Mustang was located. Investigators found Sharpton's 1995 red Ford Mustang 15 miles away on Three Forks Ridge Road in Bedford County. They're now asking the public for any information how it got there and whether anyone has seen the woman's pink purse. Those two pieces of information will be very, very valuable to us. Inside her car was a handwritten note with an address and some directions on it. 850 Shelfer Road. There was no blood found inside her car, and apart from the note, there was nothing of evidentiary value in there, but the address did not exist, and police determined it was likely used to lure Megan away. Back at the station, Robbie admitted that the drug paraphernalia was his, but said it was something he was battling alone and neither Chris nor Megan knew he used. Robbie did admit to investigators that he and Megan had been having a secret relationship. This made police wonder. Had Chris found out and killed her in a fit of rage, but Chris didn't know anything about the pair and was visibly shocked to hear about it? He acknowledged the issues within the couple's relationship, but officers recalled he was incredibly upset, visibly shaking, and devastated to hear about her passing. This, along with a solid alibi from his workplace, ruled him out. Although Robbie couldn't provide an alibi, his phone activity showed he was texting Megan all night and into the early hours worrying about where she was. Officers were also satisfied that he had played no part in her murder. Chris did give police something to work on, though. A random man had called one of Megan's phones on the day she was last seen. He was looking for someone to be a carer for his grandmother and that Naomi had recommended her. Megan was keen to get more hands-on experience in the field she was looking to go into, and this was the perfect opportunity. This was the mystery job she had been so excited to tell people about, but this was the first time they had heard a name linked to it. The only Naomi Chris knew of was someone who had studied with Megan in the previous year. Police said about following up on this lead. But while they were doing this, something else was brought to their attention, as well as the name Naomi. The high-profile disappearance of 20-year-old Holly Bobo just 6 months prior gave detectives more to consider. Holly Bobo had also been studying nursing and had gone missing in the county of Decar around 130 m away from Toma. Authorities couldn't help but wonder if there was a link between her and Megan, and the community noticed similarities between the pair as well. The media started running with the idea that this could be the work of a serial killer, further fueling the fear amongst everyone. By process of elimination, they managed to get an address for the only Naomi they thought it could have been and headed over to her house. She wasn't home, so officers got hold of her phone number from a neighbor. They were surprised to hear that Naomi didn't recommend her for the job. She didn't even like Megan. She said she barely knew her, and the extent of their relationship was that they had carpooled to their classes together a couple of times. When asked why her name would have been mentioned, she said she had no idea, as she wouldn't have recommended her for anything. Naomi told police she couldn't help any further, and the officers left confused and frustrated, as this was the lead they were counting on. A short while later, Megan's autopsy results came back. The report revealed that she had been raped before being beaten and shot through her cheek. Although the blunt force trauma was so severe her skull was almost shattered. It was the bullet that had killed her, and authorities felt strongly that she was likely beaten with the gun. A mother pleads with law enforcement to catch her daughter's killer before she says someone else gets hurt. Good evening. I'm Kim Chapman and I'm Calvin Sneed. The murder of Megan Sharpton happened in Franklin County back in July. The murder left her family devastated and on edge, knowing her killer is still out there somewhere. I wake up in the morning with the horrible realization that my daughter is dead and she's never coming back. Megan Sharpton was brutally murdered on July 2nd after she was lured to a home. She was raped several times and beaten. Her body was found burning on the side of the road in Franklin County. District Attorney Michael Taylor is overseeing the case. The investigation is continuing and hopefully we will have a successful outcome in the near future. While a murderer walks free, her family is left with a gaping hole. Kelly talks about her son's connection with Megan. He really valued her and went to her for most of his advice and needs, and he's been devastated. Sadness and grief have overcome the mother of 4 who promised to support her children through college. Megan would be graduating from nursing school on October 26th. I have to accept her diploma for her, and that will be joyous. It will break my heart because it should be her. The Sharpton are pleading for District Attorney Taylor to speed up the process and make an arrest in the case so no other woman get hurt. If you have any information on this case, call the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. Although the phone Megan took with her that night was never located, Chris was able to find the phone that had received the call about the job. Finally, they had access to the mysterious number. The call had come from an unregistered prepaid phone. 12 weeks after Megan had been found, investigators had something concrete. The number linked with the prepaid phone sent them to a store in Tella where the phone was purchased. The cameras inside the store gave them a description of the man buying the phone. At one point, he put his own phone on the counter, indicating he was clearly buying another phone that would be harder to trace for a specific reason. The cameras follow the man outside and he gets into a red pickup truck. The man would soon be identified as Timothy Ford, known as Timmy, a small-time drug dealer. And police were surprised that his name could be linked to something this big. When they tracked down the truck, his brother Paul was driving it. Paul said all he knew was that Timmy had bought it off a friend and given it to him. Timmy was tracked down. He was forthcoming and told police he had purchased the phone for a friend, coincidentally, the same friend that had sold him the red truck. His friend's name was Donnie Frank Jones Jr., a name that was actually known to police. Donnie had a criminal record and would often act as a police informant, but the connection between Donnie and Megan was still unknown. Timmy said that Donnie had recently gone in for surgery and asked him to buy the phone for him as he couldn't. Donnie gave some of his painkillers to Timmy as payment. After this, Donnie texted Timmy telling him he wanted to trade in his truck for a Mustang and asked if he could help. Timmy said he didn't understand why. Donnie had several young children and his truck was far more practical. Nonetheless, Timmy agreed to help with the truck and passed it on to his brother. Timmy said the carpet, as well as other bits of the interior, had been very recently replaced. Donnie said his wife had told him it would probably sell quicker if the inside was newer. Only then did police finally work out the connection. Donnie Jones was the husband of Naomi Jones, the woman whose name had been used in the phone call to Megan, and the woman they had already spoken to weeks before. Police now had the link they needed and went back to the couple's home, this time with the hopes of searching it. Donnie denied knowing Megan, but suddenly changed his story and said he did remember giving her and his wife a lift to classes once or twice. Donnie said he was at home with his children on the night in question. He denied Timmy's claim about the phone and told detectives they could search his house and take a DNA swab. He said he had nothing to hide. They looked around the home for a while, but found nothing of any interest and left with just the DNA sample. While the results were pending, the nursing graduation ceremony Megan should have been a part of took place. Her 18 fellow students celebrated her life and paid tribute. She was supposed to accept her degree in practical nursing from the Tennessee Technology Center. Megan worked hard for this. She wanted this. She wanted to be a nurse. And she was on her way before her life was stolen. Kelly accepted Megan's diploma on her behalf. I'm not the only one that should be sad. Every patient that she would have had, every person that she would have touched should also be lost like I am. The seat was made up where she would have been. Sad. Bittersweet, so proud of her for her work. Heartbroken that some evil person would take her from this world. The Combined DNA Index System, more commonly referred to as CODIS, is the central location for law enforcement to compare the DNA profiles of individuals who have been convicted of a certain class of crime. CODIS software enables state, local, and national law enforcement to compare DNA profiles electronically, thereby linking crimes to each other and identifying suspects by matching DNA profiles together. Through this and the DNA sample, they confirmed a match to the rape test kit performed on Megan. The DNA came back to Donnie. He was pulled in for questioning, but was still adamant they had the wrong person. He said they never dated and never had a sexual relationship. He was then confronted with the DNA evidence. He quickly changed his story. He said that he and Megan had had a consensual sexual affair, but for obvious reasons were keeping it quiet. Although police knew he was lying, they were unable to disprove this and had no choice but to let Donnie go home. Donnie had been accused of rape in the past and he also had prior felony convictions for aggravated burglary, aggravated assault, and forgery and was thus prohibited from possessing a firearm. When police caught wind that he owned guns, this allowed them to obtain a search warrant and place him under arrest. They hoped this would give them more time to look into his potential involvement in Megan's murder. 4 months after Megan was found, the last pieces of evidence were in that would help police tie Donnie to the crime. The coroner had already confirmed the type of bullet that had gone through Megan's cheek. It was a match for the rifle that belonged to Donnie. The GPS evidence also placed Donnie at the crime scenes. The burner phone that was used to contact Megan was moving alongside Donnie's phone at the time, definitively putting the two phones together in Donnie's car. It had pinged off of several locations. The first being where they suspected Megan had been abducted and attacked, the second where they believed she had been murdered, and the third where her body was found. The location she was believed to have been killed in was a farm owned by his family. It was here that they found a partially burned scarf that belonged to Megan. Monday, November 5th, at approximately 6:30 p.m., the Franklin County grand jury returned in doubt and begins to tell a homeowner for the murder of Megan Shy. He has been charged with first-degree murder of Megan and will face justice in our court system. This is rural Middle Tennessee. We don't see things like that here. We don't experience that level of brutality or violence or just coldness. Donnie Frank Jones Jr. was indicted with 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, 2 counts of aggravated rape, and first-degree murder. It was announced Tuesday that 37-year-old Donnie Jones was charged with killing Megan Sharpton. On Tuesday, the Franklin County Sheriff's Office charged 37-year-old Donnie Jones with Megan's rape and murder. A lot of the things that they had shared with me make me know that this is the right person. Then, when I started hearing how it all fell together, I had no doubt. Hearing the charges against Jones and seeing him locked behind bars gives Sharpton a sense of satisfaction for her daughter and the community. She's filled my life with so much joy for 24 years. So, I'll just take that with me and try to learn from this experience. Donnie Jones has 21 previous felony convictions, ranging from forgery to aggravated assault. He had been in jail on an unrelated charge, and he now faces 2 counts each of kidnapping, rape, and murder. He's due back in court on November 16. His bail was set at $500,000, and prosecutors began to prepare for a trial. The burner phone showed that several people had actually been called by Donnie, and they were all people that either cared for the elderly or worked in nursing in some respect. He had been phoning random people, essentially hunting for a victim. Donnie then remembered Megan from giving her a lift a year prior. He used his wife's phone to get her number and used Naomi's name to lure her into a false sense of security. He gave her the fake address and directions that led to a desolate area where he was waiting. Phone records confirmed that his wife Naomi was at work on the night of the crime, and police said she had nothing to do with Megan's murder. They also found no connection between Donnie and Holly Bobo, with separate arrests being made in her case later down the line. Although the charges against Donnie were eligible for the death penalty, prosecutors never publicly stated whether or not they planned to seek it. Donnie Jones Jr. entered a plea of not guilty to a Manchester courtroom with shackles on his hands and feet. Coming face to face with Megan Sharpton's mother, Kelly, who was clutching a picture of her daughter. Well, our theory was that the purpose of the fire was to destroy the semen present in her body. District Attorney Mike Taylor says the fire actually ended up preserving the evidence that became key after investigators linked Jones to the crime through cell phone records and Sharpton's clothing found on his family's property. I know that he had a '98 escape where he actually tried to kidnap 2 young ladies in a car and make them take him to the interstate. In court, Jones asked the judge for a speedy trial, and he mouthed to relatives what appeared to be, "He knows in his heart the universe knows who's guilty. I don't have to argue with him. The police have done their work." But as the death penalty was potentially on the table, it was later said he was keen to cut a deal with the authorities instead. The exchange would be a confession for the removal of the death penalty, as the man who killed her agreed to a plea deal that will keep him in prison for the rest of his life. In February 2013, 37-year-old Donnie Jones Jr. pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Megan Sharpton. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, he soon asked to withdraw this, stating that his attorney had convinced him to say it and his wife had been threatened. Circuit Court Judge Curtis Smith heard and granted a new motion, but the original judgment soon went back into effect and he is still serving life without parole. Megan's sister, Carrie, said Kelly Sharpton, who had gone through such trauma losing her daughter in an unbearable way, often spoke of how the pain was all-consuming and relentless. Tragically, in November 2013, Kelly would take her own life. Officers working the case expressed the sadness they felt for Megan, stating her last few minutes of life was pure hell and panic and fear. A young woman with so much promise and so many plans, her life so cruelly snatched away. This, along with the devastating death of her mother, Kelly, deeply affected many people. A 7-feet-tall memorial was created to honor Megan and can be located where she was found that early morning. It is made up of 24 stars, one for each year of her life, and a nod to the tattoos that meant so much to her. Her sister said their family will be forever grateful to the community for their support and their dedication to helping them through it all. Story 3. A security guard is patrolling a truck stops of America stop on North 1st Avenue just off of Interstate 24. As per usual, as this truck stop in Nashville is incredibly busy and borders on an area that has a high crime rate, security guards regularly patrol the area, and it is also overseen by a network of CCTV cameras. As he continues walking, he soon makes a horrifying discovery. The body of a woman is found. She has been shot dead and posed on her back with her feet together and legs apart with her arms above her head. He quickly calls emergency services. Little do the police know, this would put them in a race against time to find a sadistic serial killer before he struck again. 25-year-old Sarah Halbert had had a difficult life. After losing her mother at a young age, she was sent to live with relatives out of state. She would later move back to Tennessee to be closer to her siblings. After falling in love, she would go on to have 2 daughters who were the center of her world. The happiness was not to last, however. She would soon spiral into a drug addiction after her relationship had fallen apart and she had become a single mother as a result. She had tried to beat her crack cocaine addiction for the sake of her 2 young children. As she continued to fall deeper into drug addiction, her daughters were removed from her care. In bids to get clean, she would be in and out of rehab several times. But without her children, she spiraled further into the destructive addiction that had taken so much from her. She had become a sex worker to buy drugs and would often visit truck stops to make money. Detective Sergeant Pat Pastagle arrived on scene at the truck stop. One thing that immediately stood out to him was the lack of blood at the scene. This indicated the victim had been killed elsewhere and then her body had been moved to that location and posed in a lewd position. Due to the positioning of the body and lack of evidence from the scene of the crime, it was the worst fears of officers that this was not a first-time killing. This was someone who had killed before. The task that lay before the officers was huge. This was an incredibly busy truck stop with truckers and people coming and going all the time. But one thing they knew was that her body had been dumped there within the previous 30 minutes. The security guard who had made the discovery said she wasn't there when he last checked half an hour ago. As officers found out and began conducting a search of the scene near the body, they found a footprint with an unusual sole that was often seen in work boots. It was vital for the officers to check the CCTV, and it was this that would give them a major lead. A yellow truck is seen coming in and driving all the way to the back of the truck stop, where the body of the woman had been discovered by the security guard. 16 minutes later, the truck is seen coming back out. Checks from the stop revealed no evidence to show that the truck had stopped to refill or buy food. As the investigations of the crime scene continued, a post-mortem was carried out on the victim. Her body was found to have bruises and cuts, indicating a struggle had taken place. Her body also showed signs of torture. Her rear had a significant injury, suggesting part of her skin had been cut out with a knife. Semen found inside her body was sent off to have the DNA analyzed. It was revealed that she had died from a single close-range gunshot wound from a .22 caliber gun. Running her fingerprints through the database, it came back with a match and they could finally put a name to their victim. She was 25-year-old Sarah Hulbert. Her family were immediately contacted. They went straight to the coroner's office in disbelief, hoping that maybe it wasn't her. A few months prior to her death, she had made the decision to finally overcome her demons and was in recovery after another rehab stint. But sadly, she would later relapse and begin using again. Near to where her body had been discovered, there was a hole in the fence where drug dealers and sex workers would enter and exit the truck stop to avoid being seen by the security guards. Her sisters mentioned to the police that she had two known male associates who were also in the drug scene, and police believed they were with her the night she had been murdered. The men were soon tracked down and questioned as they were involved in the drug scene. They were reluctant to talk to the investigators. However, when the seriousness of the situation they found themselves in began to dawn on them, they admitted to being her pimps. They were adamant they had absolutely nothing to do with her murder. They had been driving around with Sarah at about 10 p.m. on June 26, and an argument had broken out. They said she exited the vehicle and went into the truck stop. Sarah Hulbert never returned. After waiting a few hours and she still hadn't come back, they assumed she must have left with a trucker, and so they too decided to leave. They agreed to give DNA samples to clear their names. When the results came in, the semen sample taken earlier did not match either of their DNA. They were ruled out as suspects. The DNA sample did not match with any sample from the sex offender database. The police then turned to the FBI for help to see if they had any cases on their nationwide database that matched the modus operandi of this one that had been committed in a different jurisdiction. And this would lead to the news that could blow the case wide open. There had been a previous murder of a woman in Lebanon, Tennessee on June 6, 2007. Just off of Interstate 40, the naked body of a woman was found in a garbage bin in a Pilot Station truck stop on Murriesboro Road. She was later identified as 48-year-old Samantha Winters. She was a sex worker and had worked at the same truck stop where Sarah had been found. Police believed that she had been picked up at the Nashville truck stop, murdered, and then her body taken out to Lebanon. Her body had been posed and she had been killed by a .22 caliber gun. But the horrifying information did not stop there. The database had two more matches in different states with these murders taking place before Sarah Hulbert had been killed. One of these victims had been a woman called Cher Drinkard who was 43 years old. Her naked body had been dumped and then posed just like the other victims in Lake Station, Indiana by the side of the road, and she too had died from a gunshot wound to the head fired from a .22 caliber weapon. The other victim was found in a motel car park in Georgia on the 29th of January, 2007 at 5 p.m. Like the other victims, she had died from a gunshot wound from a .22 caliber gun. They ran the fingerprints through the database to try and work out who she was. It was revealed that she was a mother of 5 from Atlanta, Deborah and Glover. She had spoken to her eldest child just a few hours before her death and asked her to tell her siblings that she had always and would always love them. She also told her not to call the number back. When she still hadn't contacted them, her daughter became increasingly concerned for her welfare. Deborah Ann had been battling a drug addiction and working as a sex worker. In November 2006, her daughter tried to help her beat her addiction. And in December, she had begun to make big steps on the road to recovery, but she would soon disappear. Although Deborah Ann had not been found in a truck stop, it was an area that was regularly used by truckers. The police now had 4 female victims spanning across different states. All sex workers, all posed in a degrading position, all dead from a .22 caliber gun. Detective Sergeant Pat Posigan knew it was vital to revisit the Nashville truck stop to make sure that absolutely no stone had been left unturned. As he was driving, he saw a truck headed towards him, bearing a striking resemblance to the one seen on the CCTV footage taken from the night Sarah Halbert had been murdered. Posigan turned around and followed the truck after calling his colleagues to tell them what he had seen and give them a description of the vehicle. He approached the truck after it had pulled into the truck stop, but got no response. After banging on the door, after banging for a second time, a man pulled the window curtain back and looked down at him. Posigan explained that he was with the police, and following this, the driver opened the door and exited the truck. Posigan would later say the driver appeared as if he had just been woken up. He was asked to present his driver's license and identify himself. And finally, they had a name, Bruce Douglas Mendenhall. Piglio engaged him in conversation, asking how long he had worked as a trucker and when the truck had last been in the area. Mendel said that the truck was last in Nashville in May. As the pair were talking, Piglin spotted something. There was blood on Mendel's left arm and on the inside of the driver's side door. So as not to arouse suspicion, Piglin told Mendel that officers were asking drivers of this kind of truck to provide DNA samples. Mendel signed the consent form and provided a mouth swab then and there. Piglin asked him if he could look inside the truck. Mendel agreed. Behind the seats was a sleeping compartment where Piglio found a pair of work boots. The sole bore a striking resemblance to the unusual footprints that had been found by Sarah's body. Behind the driver's seat was a black trash bag containing clothes, shoes, and tissues, all soaked in blood. Mendel explained that when he had been trying to enter the truck a few hours prior, he had accidentally cut his leg, and that was where the blood had come from. He was asked to show the cuts, but there was none. Mendel's story suddenly changed. He said the blood actually belonged to a sex worker he had picked up the night before, and she had cut her hand. Piglin knew it was vital to ensure that Mendel did not have access to any weapons. Mendel explained that he did have a gun in the truck and handed it over to Posigan. It was a .22 caliber rifle. Posigan knew the game was up. and bluntly asked him if this was the truck the police had been looking for. He asked several times before Mendel shrugged his shoulders and said, "If you say it is." Piglin asked him if he was the person they had been searching for. Mendel gave the same response. He shrugged his shoulders and replied, "If you say so." By this point, Piglin's partner had arrived on scene, and after he was escorted out of the truck, Bruce Mendenhall was arrested. It was vital to secure the truck and preserve any evidence, so it was sent to a crime lab to be processed. Over 300 items from his truck were catalogued as evidence, including handcuffs, knives, tape, and sex toys. Blood spatter was found on the walls, mattress, floor, and ceiling. The news that came next was more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. It emerged that the blood belonged to 7 different women. The bloody clothing found in the bag belonged to a sex worker from Indiana. Her family had not yet realized she had gone missing. The bullet that had killed Sarah Halbert had been fired from the gun found in his truck, and the blood on the gun came back to her and at least one other woman. Mendel signed a rights waiver and said he would voluntarily give them a statement without the presence of a lawyer. But who exactly was Bruce Mendenhall? He had been born on April 14, 1951 in Crawford, Illinois. As an adult, he had lived on Pine Street, close to downtown Albion. A neighbor from Pine Street would later say that visitors wouldn't often come to the Mendenhall household, adding he was a little different. In 1997, he had ran in the mayoral elections, but incumbent Reverend Bill Rucker had won in a landslide. Mendel had come in last place. When looking into Mendel's background, the police discovered a man with no record of violence, and he had not had any run-ins with the law. On the face of it, he appeared to be a typical family man married with 2 grown-up daughters. Jimmy Nesbitt reported for the Courier Press that Mendel had later moved into a small home in the country, surrounded by farms. This house would later be searched by police to try and help build a picture of who he was and add to their evidence. One of his neighbors recalled that Mendenhall and his wife had shown up on her driveway, his wife asking her if she wanted to purchase anything from a catalog. Mendel stayed in the vehicle. The neighbor said he just sat in the car and had a weird look on his face. The report in the Courier Press also said he would often ignore his neighbors if they tried to interact with him. The mayor of Albion, Ryan Hall, would say he hadn't really had any run-ins with the law. Everybody thought he was a little mouthy and so forth like that. Anything off-kilter? No. Not too much. The minister from the church close to the Mendel's home said that after he was arrested, his family was struggling to come to terms with the news. The news of his arrest was the talk of the town. Mayor Hall said, "We've got 2,000 people. The news spreads like wildfire. People in Albion could not believe that one of their own was capable of such horrific crimes. Everyone's in disbelief that we had an individual living here like this. He didn't mix well with others around him, but we never had any problems with him," said Mayor Hall. It was now time for the police to interview their suspect. "We're in the process of interviewing Bruce D. Mendenhall M. and the NHL. But before they knew it, he made a shocking admission. He said that he had dumped the bodies, but he hadn't killed any of them. He explained that 2 men, Richie and David, were the real murderers they were looking for. He said they would go to every truck stop he went to, and by the time they left, there would be a dead body in his truck. He would later say that a third person named Terry was also involved. I went into the top, got me something to eat, come back out, and this lady was sprawled out in the back. It was a shoe problem, not ours. He said they would leave him to clean up. He told the officers they would always use his gun to kill the women and then leave their bodies in his vehicle. Her head was on the pointed towards the driver's side and then she was down below. When talking about Sarah Halbert, he said that he had gone into the truck stop and when he came out, he found her dead body in his truck. He said that in a moment of panic, he took her body out of the truck and left her on the ground in the far corner of the stop. I dumped her body there in behind the truck trailer right out in plain view. So they show up at these truck stops and when they show up, people die. What we're trying to determine is whether you're trying to put the blame somewhere of Bruce, he told Poster Leone and pissed off at Richie and David because they did all the killings. Officers did look into his claims and found that the 3 men in question did actually exist. They were all interviewed and their fingerprints and DNA samples were taken. It turned out he had had altercations with all of these men over minor things. He then offered up another shocking confession. The latest murder had actually taken place the day before in Indiana. They then presented him with the evidence that they had gathered from the truck. Someone again. Despite his claims, there was only one set of prints on the gun, Bruce Mendenhall's. There was also no evidence to prove that any of those men had been in the back of the truck. When Mendel was asked if he was the killer, he refused to talk anymore and requested a lawyer. The police, assisted by the FBI, worked in collaboration with investigators from the other jurisdictions where the murders had occurred. Using fuel receipts, they constructed a timeline of his movements and were able to place him in the locations the victims' bodies had been found. But what could the motive possibly have been? Poster Leone would later say in a documentary he thought that it was potentially his hatred of sex workers that would be at the truck stops and his desire to degrade them post-mortem with the lewd posing of their bodies. Mendenhall's daughter disagreed and would say there's people like that will do that. Everybody knows that. Dad, he didn't really pay attention to it. He was charged with criminal homicide and taken to the Metro Davidson County Jail where he was held without bond. Following this, it was time for Bruce Mendenhall to go on trial for the murder of Sarah Halbert. His attorney, Jason Gickner, said that he had entered a plea of not guilty by video arraignment. The prosecution's case rested heavily on the plethora of physical evidence that had been gathered. Prosecutors were not seeking the death penalty as there were no aggravating circumstances that are required in the state of Tennessee. And then I asked him, I said, "Are you the person we've been looking for?" And he just looked at me and he shrugged his shoulders and then his response was, "If you say so." They also ensured that the jury were reminded of Sarah and who she was. They wanted to emphasize that she was a real person with children and a family who cared deeply for her. She was not just another piece of the evidence. After closing arguments, the jury retired to consider the evidence, and before long, they had reached their verdict. Bruce Mendenhall was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Sarah Halbert. In Tennessee, a first-degree murder conviction and subsequent life sentence is interpreted to mean 60 years in prison. A shocking story would soon be reported. Whilst in prison, his wife had passed away from natural causes. Following her death, Mendel received the insurance money. He used this money to offer $15,000 to 2 inmates to kill the 3 men he had tried to blame for the murders. One of the murders was due to be staged as a copycat to mislead the police into thinking the real murderer was still out there. But it didn't stop there. He had allegedly tried to have 2 investigators, Padalian and Lee Freeman, murdered. Pastione would later remark that in his career spanning more than 3 decades, he had never known of someone trying to have him murdered. He said in 2010, he went on trial for these offenses. The court heard from the 2 inmates he had tried to pay to commit the murders. One of them was in prison for explosives charges and was asked by prosecutor Rachel Sabrero what were his words to the best of your recollection. He replied they also heard from the other inmate who was serving 10 years on burglary charges. He was belligerent about those 2 officers. He wanted those 2 officers dead. That's point blank what he said. At around 2:30 p.m., the jury retired to deliberate. And less than 4 hours later, they had reached a verdict. He was found not guilty of the allegations relating to wanting to have the 2 officers killed. When it came to the plot to have the 3 other men killed, he was convicted. Davidson County Criminal Court Judge Steve Dewar sentenced him to 30 years in prison, 10 years for each count that would be served consecutively. He was also charged with the murder of Samantha Winters. On August 2, 2007, Mendel waived his right to a preliminary hearing. And a few weeks later, on 17th, Bruce Mendel was indicted by a Wilson County grand jury for the murder of Samantha Winters. Prior to standing trial in this case, Mendel filed an appeal against his conviction for the murder of Sarah Halbert. He argued that his legal counsel had been ineffective. He said there were 7 possible suspects and that his lawyers could have shown evidence to demonstrate this. However, it was noted that he had failed to give said list to the court. His appeal also said he wanted further DNA testing to be carried out. The Tennessee Criminal Court of Appeals rejected this. Since his appeal had been rejected, the trial for Samantha's case could now go forward. His lawyer said it's really not the sign of a serial killer. They got a lot of blood evidence. They've got pages of blood evidence, but none of it is from Samantha Winters. It's from Sarah Halbert. But the prosecution fired back, saying when all the evidence had been presented, the jury would deliberate for less than 2 hours before they returned a verdict of guilty for abuse of a corpse and first-degree murder. He again was sentenced to life in prison. In 2008, it was reported he had been linked to yet another killing. 28-year-old Letitia Yvonne Milliken had gone missing from Nashville. She was living in a makeshift camp off of Heritage Avenue amongst other homeless people. She had also been a sex worker. Pastiglian had worked with her family to try and find her. Her family hadn't heard from her for the last couple of months. And on June 26, 2007, a missing persons report was filed the same day Sarah Halbert's body had been found. The police had been given an item that contained Letitia's DNA to compare with some of the blood found in Mendel's truck. It came back as a match. Several families are still waiting for convicted truck stop serial killer Bruce Mendenhall to stand trial. It's been 8 years since a jury convicted him in Nashville, but he's charged in 3 other cases. He's also a suspect in the murders of a half-dozen other women, including Letitia Milliken, whose body has never been found. As News Channel 5's Mark Bellinger reports, her family is frustrated with the wait. This is maybe 4 years before she passed away. Jessica Donahue carries the memories of her sister in a very simple photo album. I think my sister's worthy of justice, and I think she needs it and her kids need it. Her sister, Letitia Milliken, disappeared in March 2007. 3 months later, a security guard found a body at a Nashville truck stop. Donahue and her mother, Tammy Northcott, went there thinking the very worst. So, I hit the concrete in the truck stop American parking lot, and you just fly in helicopters, and I really thought it was my child, but it was not Milliken. It was Sarah Hulberg. A jury convicted Bruce Mendenhall of the murder. They have families. That was my biggest sister. I've looked up to her. I grew up with her. She has kids, and it's horrible to have to look at her son's face and not be able to tell him. I don't know where she's at. I don't know exactly how she died. Northcott and Donahue fear they may never get there. Day in court. If anything comes out of this, I want him to see a picture of my sister and hear her name out loud and let him know that my family knows what he did. I hope her face haunts him every night while he's resting with Tennessee's finest. Karma Papera was a 32-year-old mother to 2 children and was known to visit truck stops regularly. She had last been seen in the south side of Indianapolis Interstate 465 at a Flying J truck stop. Sergeant Matt Mount of the MPD said they've taken DNA from both parents to try and match with the DNA from the blood on the clothing that was found inside the truck. Down in Tennessee, the DNA tests came back as a match. The police also found the clothes she had been wearing that day, her phone, and her bank card. On April 10, 2008, Mendel was charged with the murder of Karma Papera, even though her body hadn't been found. Helen Marshall, the deputy prosecutor for Marion County, said, "It definitely makes it much more difficult to proceed. We are working very hard to be able to file the case against him here." August 15, 2011, at the 8-mile marker of the Libby, Nunn Parkway in Kentucky, human remains were found. The medical examiner's office used DNA to identify the person. It came back as being the remains of Karma Papera. Mendel is about to stand trial again, yet for another victim. I've learned the now 70-year-old was just transferred from the state prison in Tennessee to the Marion County Jail in Indianapolis. He will now be prosecuted for the 2007 murder of one Karma J. Papera. She is one of as many as 9 victims allegedly killed by the former long-haul trucker from Albion, Illinois. The body of the 32-year-old mother of 2 was found back in 2011, and DNA has linked Mendenhall to her murder. To this day, authorities do continue to look at him in connection, Rebecca, with so many other unexplained or unsolved murders. And Nick, you've even come to know Mendenhall over the years. Yes, unfortunately, I have. He's written me several times from prison, always denying that he is a serial killer. But in his latest letter, he did talk to me about the Papera case and how he was surprised to find that they had located her body. Bruce Mendenhall is a remorseless killer who was serving life for 2 murders in Tennessee. But the serial killer's case file never really closes. Why? Because DNA continues to link Mendel to more victims. In Birmingham, Alabama, Mendel was charged with the murder of Lucille Carter, known as Greta. She had been found in a bin. A bag was covering her head and face, and there was tape wrapped around her neck. She had also been left naked and like the other women, she had died from a bullet fired from a .22 caliber gun. Investigators now believe that Mendel may be responsible for at least 9 murders, with other potential cases in Georgia, Alabama, and Illinois. Indianapolis Deputy Police Chief Scott Robinette said, "It would not be too far of a stretch to say there's probably women who are missing and may have been subject to his hands. Yet, we have not found those victims." The brutal and depraved crimes of Bruce Mendel have left families and communities in tatters. His crimes are impossible to comprehend with no motive, and the full extent of them may never be fully known. Many are holding on to the hope that they will one day have the answers they desperately need, and that their loved ones will see justice be served. Story 4. 87-year-old Gladys Godfrey lived alone in a bungalow on Devon Drive, on the Ladybrook estate in Mansfield, England. The estate was mainly populated by elderly people. There was a strong sense of community and everyone knew each other. As she was housebound, she used to sleep in a chair in her living room, and as she struggled with her mobility, she would use a walking frame to get around. She was friendly and kind, well known in her local area and a much-loved member of her community. She could often be seen standing on her front doorstep saying hello to people who passed by. She had no children but was very close to her niece Sandra. Sandra would visit her aunt once a week and the pair enjoyed a fantastic relationship. When Sandra was a child, her mother had to work and Gladys was a huge part of her life and had helped to bring her up. Sandra had said she was like a second mother to her. On the April 28, 2001, Gladys' bungalow was broken into at roughly 3:30 in the morning. Gladys was asleep in the living room. She was awoken by a knocking at the front door. After Gladys got up from her chair and opened the door, a man stood in front of her. He pushed her back in and forced his way into the property. She was sexually assaulted after he had knocked her over. She was frail, standing at 4 feet 11 inches and around 6 stone, but she was able to hit the attacker with a bottle of lemonade. She scratched him and also pulled an earring from his ear before he took her bag and ran away. When the police arrived at the scene to take her statement, she was able to give them a description. The person who had attacked her was a slim young white man with dark hair, as she had scratched the offender. During the struggle, samples were taken from underneath her fingernails and these, coupled with the earring, were sent away to be analyzed. A partial DNA profile was found and compared against the National DNA Database. The National DNA Database, formed in 1995, holds DNA profiles and samples taken from police suspects and samples taken from crime scenes. When this partial DNA profile, taken from under her nails, was put through the database, it came back with no matches. Over the days that followed, her handbag and other items that had been stolen from her house were found. Her bag was discovered on R&L Drive and they were able to plot the other items on a map, illustrating the direction the attacker had gone in. Paul Bacon was a solicitor and former president of the Nottingham Law Society. He said this demonstrated how caring the community was, as they had all worked hard to get Gladys's items back to her. He also said that based on the location of the stolen items, it was apparent that this was a local person who knew the area. But as time went by, the police were unable to identify the offender. On Saturday, September 7, 2002, Gladys had spent time at home, whilst also seeing her best friend during the day. At 5:15 a.m. the following morning, the panic alarm was triggered, but the warden at her complex did not go to her bungalow. A few hours later, a neighbor went round to deliver a paper and found that Gladys's home appeared to have been ransacked. Police officers were called to the Ladybrook estate at around 9:30 a.m. When officers entered the property, they found the body of Gladys Godfrey. It was apparent that she had been subjected to an appalling attack. A post-mortem revealed a catalogue of more than 20 injuries. Clumps of her hair had been viciously pulled out. Her neck and skull had both been fractured. She had died from manual strangulation as well as head trauma. So severe were her injuries, her family were not allowed to identify her body. Her walker that she had used to get around was tipped over on its side, and there were blood stains near the fireplace in the living room and on the base and pillow of her bed. Based on the evidence at the scene, it appeared that the initial attack had taken place in the living room of the bungalow. As there was hair and blood by the fireplace, it appeared that she had been pushed to the ground. There was one blood mark that immediately got the attention of investigators, a footprint. Footprints can often be key pieces of evidence at a crime scene. The crime scene manager was able to ascertain that the footprint most likely belonged to a Euroland shoe. And this, coupled with the fingerprints found in the bungalow, added to the pile of evidence being gathered. After being beaten viciously, it appeared that she had been dragged into her bedroom. Whilst in her bedroom, she had been raped. Those who were known to Gladys had their fingerprints taken to compare with the fingerprints found at the crime scene. After doing this, there were still fingerprints inside the bungalow belonging to an unknown person. The community was in shock. How could a frail pensioner who was known and loved by many have died in such an appalling way? Neighbors say Gladys Godfrey liked nothing better than to stand in her doorway and give a friendly wave to people as they went by. They just can't believe she's become a murder victim. She was a lovely little old lady and she loved to talk to people. It's unbelievable that somebody killed somebody. Detective Chief Superintendent Phil Davies said there was no evidence of items being stolen, nor was there sign of a forced entry. He said, "What is clear is that prior to her death, she endured quite severe physical and sexual abuse. Any attack on an elderly person is obviously abhorrent, but this was a very severe attack." During a press conference, Detective Inspector Stuart Bailey said that they now believe the person who had committed the first attack in April 2001, could also be responsible for her murder. Bradley said, "Because of the similarity in the two offenses, which were both in the early hours of the morning and at a weekend, we believe there could be a connection. We are considering a link. We are not saying there is definitely a link, but there is a strong possibility that these offenses could be linked." Kevin Flint, the senior investigating officer for Nottinghamshire Police, said it was one of, if not the most horrendous case that we have ever investigated. The partial DNA profile from the attack on Gladys in April 2001 was compared to the full profile taken from the scene of the murder. This came back as a match. whoever had attacked Gladys before had come back and murdered her. Some of her closest friends on Devon Drive on the Ladybrook estate in Mansfield say the pensioner's home was broken into about a year ago. They say that Mrs. Godfrey told them that the intruder stole her handbag and threatened to rape her. They say the incident was reported to the police. The task before the officers was huge. They needed to speak with neighbors and people in the area to try and gain any knowledge that could help catch her killer. A detective constable who was knocking on doors, Phil Cumberbatch, said, "Every time you thought you were having a bad day, you thought of what happened to Gladys and cracked on." Although they had a DNA profile, this soon proved fruitless. Whoever had raped and murdered her had not been arrested before, and their profile was not on the national DNA database. Not only had this offender's crimes dangerously escalated and increased in brutality, but people had no way of knowing if he would attack again. 2 months after the murder of Gladys Godfrey, her niece Sandra spoke at a press conference and appealed for anyone with information to come forward and talk to the police. "Somebody must know something, and we just hope it will shake the memory to come forward for the slightest little thing that might be interesting. The whole family is devastated by it all." Detective Inspector Stuart Bradley said, "The DNA is absolutely vital in that it will be able to take us forward, and we will be able to eliminate people who are put forward to the incident room very, very quickly." Nearly 5 months after Gladys's murder, Crime Watch ran an appeal on her case to try and generate any new leads and as much publicity as possible. 87-year-old Gladys Godfrey beat off an intruder. 18 months later, he came back to rape and kill her. Sandra told the show, "She was poorly and she was very frail. We did not expect her to carry on many more years, but for her to live the life she has led and then die in these circumstances, it was devastating to us all." The police kept in contact with Sandra to keep her up to date, but they still seemed no closer to closing the case. As they were still struggling to catch the killer, the police decided to change their strategy. As they had a DNA profile of the killer, they decided they would take DNA samples from all over Mansfield. It would be one of the largest elimination screenings in their history. It was voluntary, and more than 1,000 men gave samples over the following months, demonstrating how desperate the local community was to catch the killer. Unfortunately, after the mass screening was completed, the officers were back at square one. None were a match to the killer. In 2003, the Forensic Intelligence Bureau, known as the FB, was established. Work was being carried out by scientists in Birmingham to conduct further research into familial DNA searching, aiming to find families a DNA sample could be from. Nottingham Police Force volunteered to be one of the first to trial this new investigative tool. Francis Bates, the senior intelligence officer, led the work on familial DNA testing. The FIB worked in collaboration with the police and visited the area. They were able to produce a list of people that could have been related to the murderer. Richard Pineon, the head of the FIB, said, "We established the first forensic intelligence bureau in the world, which primarily was concerned with looking at DNA from scenes of crime and analyzing that and trying to forward investigations where no other information was available. The FIB would run the sample from the crime scene through the familial DNA search engine. Doing this reorders the DNA found on the DNA database in order of similarity to the sample Richard Pinson said familial DNA is the same as an eyewitness. It narrows down a list of people for the police to talk to. Nearly a year had passed since Gladys had been attacked and murdered in her own home, and the police were still searching for whoever was responsible. More than 2,500 men had been compared to the DNA sample, and they still had not been able to find a match. Those in the local community were living in fear, terrified that the killer could strike again. The police had followed more than 8,000 lines of inquiry, but had still not caught the murderer. In response to the feelings of fear, more than 2,000 free security alarms were given to older people living on the estate, and more than 1,000 personal alarms were given out, too. Alongside this, Nottinghamshire County Council also issued leaflets to vulnerable people in the area. According to a BBC report urging people to check the identity of everyone who calls at their door before they let them in. Don't let anyone in unless you know who they are. And if you are in any doubt, call the police. The police appealed once again to the public for help with Gladys' niece saying, "I just hope somebody out there, if they know the slightest little thing, even if they think it is not important or irrelevant, then please come forward." 15 months had now passed since the brutal sexual assault and murder of 87-year-old Gladys Godfrey. When it came to the familial DNA testing, the first thing the intelligence team did was look at anyone on the familial DNA list who was local to the area and draw up family trees to eliminate as many people as possible. 2 families became the immediate priority. It was voluntary for the men in these families to offer their fingerprints and DNA to rule them out of the inquiry. These samples were compared with the killer. Just 24 hours later, the news would come in that would blow the case wide open. They had finally had a match for the DNA taken from the intimate swabs, the partial profile taken from underneath her fingernails from the first attack, and the fingerprints matched 12 of the fingerprints found in the bungalow. This was a bittersweet moment for those involved. Gladys Godfrey had been subjected to a sustained and brutal attack and had died under unimaginable circumstances, but the person responsible had now been identified. An arrest plan was drawn up and their prime suspect was soon in custody. 22-year-old Jason Ward. He was arrested at work on the 5th of December and was swiftly taken to the police station to be processed and interviewed. In spite of the plethora of forensic evidence, he denied that he had anything to do with the sexual assault and murder of Gladys Godfrey. A search of his home was conducted to help build the case against him. In the search, they found a Euroland shoe. Analysis showed that it matched the footprint found at the scene. Traces of blood were found on the shoe. Also, this came back as a match for Gladys Godfrey. As the evidence continued to mount, he admitted to being the person who had gone into her bungalow and carried out the sexual assault. Jason Ward was charged with sexual assault and murder. After he was charged, he finally confessed to everything. Jason Ward was remanded in custody. He was also charged with the attempted rape of Gladys in April 2001. He was given the date of the 28th of May when he would have to go to Nottingham Crown Court. Ward had worked as a machine operator and had lived on Benton Street, less than 2 miles away from Gladys Godfrey's home. His previous address had been a quarter of a mile away, just before the mass DNA screening had started. Ward had moved to just outside of the priority screening perimeter. According to a BBC article, he lived with his mother and father and had few friends, choosing to spend much of his time alone. He had had substance and alcohol abuse issues and had received a fine for being drunk and disorderly. Someone who knew him in school told the BBC Ward was strange, weird, and easily led. Paul Bacon, who had worked on more than 50 murder cases, was appointed as Ward's defense. He would later say in a documentary that it was really difficult to understand his motivation for the offense, adding, "I think he found it difficult to understand his motivation, too." It was arranged for psychiatric evaluations to be carried out on Jason Ward. At his first court appearance, he entered a plea of guilty to the burglary, indecent assault, rape, and murder of Gladys Godfrey. Jason Ward was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 22 years for the rape and murder of Gladys Godfrey. The judge took the psychiatric evaluations into account when deciding the punishment. Francis Bates from the Forensic Intelligence Bureau, who led the pioneering familial DNA testing that helped catch Ward, was there for the sentencing. She said, "I was sat in the public gallery near the family, and to see the family's reaction, and to see that they had got closure in this case meant a great deal to me. I was only a small part of the case, but to know that I had helped provide that closure was really important to me, and something I still think about to this day." When talking about the vital work of familial DNA testing that had helped catch Ward, Richard Pineon said, "Without that case, and without those people working together, we would not have been able to prove how effective this was. This was a landmark case. It was the first time anywhere in the world that familial DNA searching had solved a murder. The murder of Gladys Godfrey shocked the close-knit community and devastated her family. Through the pioneering work of the FIB, familial DNA testing, and the commitment of investigators, her killer was finally brought to justice." Story 5. This case takes us to Memphis, Tennessee. A part of the world with a big history, one that is rich in creativity and culture, with many a talent coming out of there, and many big moments that contributed to the history. Books. One person that saw their career catapult to new heights after moving to Memphis was 34-year-old Lorenz-Ann Wright. Born in 1975, Lorenz-Ann was a sprightly child with an abundance of energy and a huge smile. His mother Deborah lived with her mother who helped her to raise him. And although his father Herb didn't live with them, he was very much a big part of his son's life. From a young age, Lorenz-Ann's dream was to play professional basketball. His family said they knew he had a natural gift for it, saying this was helped further by how tall he was. His mother, Deborah, said he was such a long baby, she couldn't lie him down on her lap because his head would go off her knees. The minute Lorenz-Ann started playing, he showed an instant flair for basketball with people describing him as a force of nature on the court. His parents were just as passionate about helping him succeed and making his dreams a reality. Lorenz-Ann split his time between his mother's home in Oxford and his father's home 80 miles away in Memphis. He started off playing for Lafayette High School in Mississippi before he moved to Memphis permanently, and spent his senior year playing for Booker T. Washington High School with an array of college scholarship offers. Lorenz-Ann had some big choices to make. Ultimately, he decided to go with the Memphis Tigers at Memphis State University and threw absolutely everything he had into it. Straight out of university, his life would change forever. He entered the 1996 NBA draft and was the 7th overall pick in the first round, being drafted by the Los Angeles Clippers. Lorenzen soon married Shara Robinson, who he had known since his junior year. They had met through a basketball game. Her father was one of his coaches. Over the coming years, the couple would go on to have 7 children together. In 1995, their first child, Lorenzen Wright Jr., was born. After this came their eldest daughter Lauren, twins Lamar and Chamar, their daughter Sophia, a son called Lawson, and their daughter Sierra. Lorenzen doted on his children with those that knew him, saying nothing was more important than them. In 1999, he moved from the Los Angeles Clippers to the Atlanta Hawks before being traded to the Memphis Grizzlies in 2001. His friends said he loved his newfound fame, embracing his fans and never turning anyone down for an autograph or a picture. Although overwhelming, he enjoyed this side of his career and used it as a way to give back to everyone that had supported him along the way. Professionally, he was reaching heights some could only dream of, but personally, his life would soon take a devastating turn. Sierra was born in 2002, but tragically, just 11 months later, she passed away in their family home from sudden infant death syndrome. Ladies and gentlemen, over the weekend, the Memphis Grizzlies lost one of their family members. Would you please rise and join us in observing a moment of silence in the memory of Sierra Wright? Our thoughts and prayers go out to the Wright family. Earlier today at Mount Vernon Baptist Church, members of the Memphis Grizzlies gathered in support of Lorenzen Wright, who made his first public comment since the passing of his 11-month-old daughter, Sierra Simone Wright. I cannot put into words the sense of grief that Sierra and I feel at this time. The loss of our daughter, Sierra Simone, is devastating. We loved her so much and we miss her dearly. My wife Sierra is a very strong woman and together we will support each other and deal with this great loss to the best of our ability. My daughter was a very precious part of me. Everybody knew that. But I don't think it's the time right now for me to be selfish for my own selfish reasons of wanting to keep her here because I know she's in a better place. This fueled Lorenzen to found the Sierra Simone Wright Scholarship Fund named after his baby girl. The scholarship fund granted an annual scholarship to a Memphis high school senior who had plans to attend a Memphis area college or university. His philanthropy continued with him contributing to numerous children's charities, hosting basketball camps, contributing to children's reading programs, and visiting St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. I always like to give back to the community. If we can put a smile on these people's faces just to see us here, you know. Some of the people say, you know, I couldn't pass this up. I just wanted to come here and spend time with you guys. You know, if we can shed a little light on their lives, you know, God bless them. I'd love to be here with them. In 2006, he made the move back to the Atlanta Hawks. 2 years later, he was involved in a multiplayer trade, moving from Atlanta to Sacramento Kings, and shortly after this, he moved to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Lorenzen Wright had well and truly had a very successful career, playing in over 770 NBA games, spanning an incredible 13 seasons and garnering around $50 million in contracts. But as 2010 came around after a bad thumb injury, Lorenzen Wright retired from professional basketball. I'm Lorenz Wright of the Memphis Grizzlies, and I'm going to show you how I'm living here in Memphis, Tennessee. Those that knew him said that over the last few years, he had played as hard as he'd worked, and a lot of the huge fortune he had amassed during his time in the NBA was all but gone. As well as buying lavish homes and new cars, a vast amount of money had been given to various family members, friends, and the community that loved him. With one of his friends saying he was a giver, he gave to anybody who put their hand out. He bought people cars and houses, helped them open businesses, and enter colleges. His custom-built 17-room home in Tennessee was repossessed, as was his $1.1 million home in Atlanta. He was also in arrears on his $26,000 a month alimony and child support obligations, and Scherer claimed they often had creditors knocking at the door. After 13 years together in January 2010, he and Scherer divorced. Lorenz moved to Atlanta while his ex-wife and children remained in Memphis, Tennessee. He still had a home in Tennessee and would come back and forth to see his family. Many sources state that he and Scherer still had an intimate relationship but remained separated. Sources said that Lorenz was a serial cheater, whilst others say the infidelity definitely came from both sides. At one point in Atlanta, Lorenz phoned a friend and told him he wanted to come back to Tennessee permanently and get back together with Scherer, expressing how unhappy he was away from his family and ex-wife. Needless to say, things did appear to be on the up for Lorenz career-wise. He had 2 NBA teams inviting him to try out, and he was scheduled to fly to Israel to try out for a team there. His friend and roommate, Michael, said that Lorenz was planning on traveling back to Memphis mid-July, but in the days leading up to it, he seemed a bit on edge and not really himself. His children had already spent a lot of time with him in Atlanta over the summer, and Lorenz was telling everyone how much fun they were all having, watching films as a family, visiting amusement parks and water parks, and practicing basketball together. But the plan was, Lorenz was to visit Memphis for a short while, and take his children back to Atlanta with him so they could spend the rest of the summer there. On July 18, 2010, with this plan in mind, Lorenz flew back to Memphis. He had hopes of attending his sister's baby shower and proudly watched his eldest son, Lorenz Wright Jr., play basketball. Throughout the day, he caught up with some friends and even took a picture of himself on one of his friends' phones. He then spent some of the evening at Scherer's house, leaving late into the night. Germantown police received a disturbing 911 call. 11 gunshots could be heard in quick succession, but the words coming from the caller were unclear. When the call was silent, the dispatcher assumed it was a hang-up. The person on the end of the line would later turn out to be 34-year-old Lorenz Wright. Lorenz never showed up to his sister's baby shower, and after repeatedly trying to get hold of him, his mother, Deborah, was starting to worry. He was also said to be his friend's best man, and his failure to turn up to that rang even more alarm bells. Although some of his friends thought he might have just wanted a break. When Deborah learned that her son wasn't even returning his daughter Lauren's calls, she knew she had to talk to the police. On July 22, Deborah filed a missing persons report, and officers arrived at Scherer's house to take some statements. Scherer told police that Lorenz had left the house on the Night of July 18th with a random man she didn't know, some drugs, and an unspecified but considerable sum of money. He was on the phone at the time and said to the person on the other end he was going to flip something for $110,000. Scherer said after this he got into his car with the man and was not seen or heard from again. Rumors began to circulate that Lorenzan was deeply involved in drugs, possibly even a cartel. And people wondered if this was behind his disappearance. But if he left the house with a vast amount of cash, the possibility of a robbery being at the root of what had happened was also something to be considered. Lorenzan's disappearance became a high-profile and well-publicized case straight away, and media outlets started running with the story. 8 days would pass with nothing from Lorenzan. Although she was holding out hope, Deborah said that every day that went by, she knew the outcome was looking less and less positive. Finally, the police caught a break. The 911 call that had come in would soon finally be followed up on, and the link was made to the missing Lorenzan. The dispatcher that had answered the call did not report what she had heard to her supervisor, nor was the call tracked in any way to try and find out the location. Failure to report the call would result in a payout to Lorenzan's family, and police acknowledged the 9 days that had come and gone had hindered the investigation massively. After finally following up on the call and pinpointing the location on July 28, a terrible discovery was made. Police in Memphis, Tennessee have found the body of former NBA player Lorenzan Wright. That's according to Wright's uncle, who tells the Associated Press that police broke the news to the athlete's father Wednesday afternoon. A police officer would not confirm that, but said a man's body had been found near a wooded area some 15 miles south of downtown Memphis. The local news helicopter showed investigators searching the area for evidence. It is not clear yet how he died. I mean, I can't believe it. When I got the call, my mom, she called me. I broke down crying. It's just very heartbreaking. He's a wonderful person to work with. It's just so unfortunate. I knew in my heart that something had gone wrong. Lorenzan's body was found in a grassy area of southeast Shelby County. The road near his body was called Callus Cutoff, a shortcut that only people that knew the area well would be aware of. It was a route that Lorenzan would often take to visit his mother, as it was a lot quicker. The severe decomposition due to the time that had lapsed and the hot summer weather had left him weighing just 57 pounds. And police said that if you knew him well, visually identifying him would have been almost impossible. When Deborah got the call, she was desperate to see her son. She thought if she followed his route and went to the location, she might find some clues as to how this had happened. Despite police trying to stop her, she forced her way under the tape and ran to where he was. The autopsy revealed that he had been shot at least 5 times, but possibly more, and the 911 call he had made that night had definitely picked up his final moments. There were 2 shots in his head, 2 bullets in his chest, and bullet fragments in his right forearm. Officers reported that there were 2 different shell casings nearby, implying there could have been multiple murder weapons, but no guns were found at or near the scene. Despite this, it would be some time before police officially ruled it foul play. Fans, family, and friends gathered around the scene of the crime, including Lorenzan's former teammates, and tributes began pouring in. There was a teammate of mine back in Cleveland, and we spent so many days together to hear that he was killed in his hometown. It was very emotional. We wanted to see exactly what was going on with the murder scene. How he felt going down this way. What was he doing coming this way? You know, why is he on a desolate road driving down the street or whatever? If he wasn't driving, there's no car. So, something had to be going on, you know, and then for him to make a call like, "Hey, somebody come help me." That's amazing to me. Well, we were in there. We were buying furniture at the time we heard it on the radio. And when I heard it, I told her, I said, "Did you hear what that just said? That he's been missing since July 19th. I was like, what? Wait a minute. Let's see what's going on with this. We couldn't contact anybody at that time, but it just so unlike him to just disappear and not contact anybody. And so, we waited and went to work and came back on the news. And it was like, oh my God, he's really gone. And they found his body. Whoever did this, we ain't happy about it. So, we're reaching out to everybody out there. If you know something, tell us. Please say whatever it is. Because this boy was loved not only by Memphis, but the whole world. Everybody that knew him loved this boy. If you love Lorenzo, like everybody else does, bring yourself forward. Say something. Let everybody know what's going on because this is ridiculous. This boy was a good man. He did everything, especially for his family. Investigators said the area Lorenzo was found in was so quiet, so remote, and so dark at night. No matter how many times he drove down that road, he must have felt something was wrong, unless he was forced or lured out there. Or his car was followed. The former wife of Lorenzo Wright told police that the former NBA player left her home carrying money and a box of drugs the night he disappeared. She says he returned a short time later, then left again with drugs and money. She said she overheard Wright telling someone on the phone that he was going to quote flip something for $110,000. No one has been arrested in connection with Wright's murder. Several days later, on August 1st, Memphis police conducted a search of Scherer's home. They found burned pieces of metal and a burnt letter addressed to both Lorenzo and Scherer. But law enforcement did not confirm if this meant anything. Neighbors said that Scherer had been burning things in the garden several nights before with an unknown male, which seemed out of place given how swelteringly hot the weather was. Lorenzo had a close group of friends, some of which he saw the night he went missing, and all of them were trying to piece together what had happened to him. The only thing that sprung to mind was that Lorenzo had received a phone call at some point during the evening from Scherer. The call was described as unpleasant and very heated with lots of shouting coming from Scherer's end. Lorenzo told his friend that he would go and see his ex-wife, hopefully calm her down, then call him later to meet back up. But Lorenzo would never make that call. A few days later, a public memorial service was held for him. Hundreds of fans, family members, and friends poured into the FedEx Forum in Memphis to show their love and pay their respects. Each one of Lorenzo and Scherer's children was wearing a different team hat to honor their father's 13-year NBA career. Memphis Grizzlies owner, Michael Heisley, said, "We should all leave this hall with the thought that we're going to do a little bit in Lorenzo's honor to make sure things like this don't happen again. That's the biggest service you could pay him. After this, things went very quiet. A year would pass with no arrests being made and no substantial movement being made either. Investigators were finding it tremendously tough to solve a high-profile case with actually very little evidence to go on and no clear motive as to why someone could want him dead. Crime in Memphis was most definitely not uncommon. In 2001, 2005, and 2007, Memphis was ranked the second most dangerous city in the nation. Among cities with a population of over 500,000. And according to the FBI, in the same year Lorenzo was killed, Memphis was declared the third most dangerous city in the United States. With various types of crimes being so prevalent and widespread for a long time, police were concerned they may never get the answers they need, as the reality was it could just be completely random for no real reason. In 2011, a reward for any information in the case stood at $21,000. Crime Stoppers had less than 50 tips come in, and the fear about whether or not the case would reach a conclusion loomed over everyone. One officer recalled they weren't sure whether people were staying quiet because they genuinely didn't know what had happened or because they did know and were scared to talk. A year later, however, in 2012, a man who was already in prison asked to talk to the FBI. He said he had information regarding the case and the people involved. In 2009, he was acquitted of murdering his girlfriend and was out on bail at the time Lorenzo was killed. He was finally convicted on a lesser charge of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years behind bars. He said he could tell police exactly where to find the gun that killed Lorenzo and spoke about a failed plot to kill him once before. Authorities kept this very quiet, but started to look into these claims carefully and thoroughly. While this was going on, Scherer was involved in a legal issue herself. As part of their divorce settlement, Lorenzo took out a $1 million life insurance policy, which was paid to Scherer 1 year after his death. Lorenzo specified the policy was intended for their children. But according to one source, within months of receiving the $1 million, Scherer had spent all but $55. Lorenzo's father and executive of his estate, Herb, proceeded to sue Scherer on behalf of his grandchildren. The lawsuit claimed that Lorenzo had directed the money be spent on their children, but it was reported that the money had been spent in various other ways, including almost $100,000 on new cars, $69,000 on furniture, $346,000 for a new home and renovations, $5,000 for lawn equipment, and $11,750 for a trip to New York. Scherer, however, insisted the family was financially sound with $1.40 $4 million in assets to fall back on, but she later agreed to a confidential settlement. That same year, Scherer published a book called Mr. Tell Me Anything. Part of the description read, with the constant chaos surrounding women, new acquaintances, family, and greed, their efforts would soon appear to be ultimately in vain. Combined with the newfound lies and deception, she finds herself questioning his commitment. A breaking point is reached. She makes a life-altering decision. Does it work out for her good? Did all his lies finally catch up to him? Would he or she pay the ultimate price? It painted a picture of a marriage shrouded in vengeance, greed, volatility, and violence. Eyebrows were raised, and people were left wondering if this work of fiction was far more than that. While some believe this was all based on truth, painting the relationship as toxic. Others said it was nothing more than fictitious and damaging lies and wasn't based on reality and the person Lorenzan was. Scherer was interviewed by several journalists after the release and had in part this to say. The book, why did you write it? What are you hoping to accomplish? The marriage? I mean, you go through your ups and downs. I just believe that when the downs become more overwhelming and there's more downs than UPS, then that's the time to kind of go back and see which one outweighs the other. Lorenzan had a problem with keeping his hands to himself or Mr. Tony anything this character did, and I grew him from Lorenzan. I produced him from experiences with Lorenzan. So yeah, he had a problem with that. You're planning a sequel, too, right? If I look that way. Yeah. When is that coming out? It's 90% done. It's going to take you all the way up to Mr. Tony's death and just a little bit past. Is Mr. Tony anything murdered? Oh, yes, he is. Did you have anything to do with his murder or his disappearance? I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm an author. And the police should find his killer. For my name to be even in the same sentence or something like that. I'm a minister of the Lord and I've never been in any type of trouble or anything. I'm a mother, an author, and a wife. It had now been 7 long years since Lorenzan's body was found. The investigation into his death had become one of Memphis Police Department's most high-profile unsolved cases. Scherer had since married and divorced and briefly dated a journalist called Kelvin Cowens, who interviewed her about her book. The pair eventually moved to Houston together with Scherer's children. Kelvin said the relationship eventually crumbled because he couldn't get past what he described as an obsession with Scherer getting money from Lorenzan's estate. November 9, 2017. Operation Rebound information in the unsolved murder of Lorenzan Wright. Authorities now say a gun found over the summer may be the one used in the crime. The gun the killer may have used was found in a lake in Walnut, Mississippi, in Tipp County. Thanks to the tip-off from the man in prison 5 years before, officers finally located the gun, believed to have been the murder weapon. It was found in a lake in Walnut, Mississippi, about 45 miles away from where Lorenzan was found. And just as the man had said, Major Darren Goods, who was helping to lead the investigation, would dub this find as Operation Rebound, describing it as a fresh look into the case. In basketball, when you get a rebound, that gives you a second chance. He said this would give us a second chance to bring some closure to this case and give this grieving family some relief. The man that had tipped investigators off about the gun and the plan to kill Lorenzan would soon be revealed to be Jimmy Martin. Jimmy Martin was actually Scherer's cousin. A month later, in December 2017, huge and shocking new developments were announced. This morning, the Shelby County grand jury indicted Billy R. Turner for the premeditated first-degree murder of Lorenzan Wright. On November 9 of this year, authorities located the murder weapon in a lake near Walnut, Mississippi. Mr. Turner will be arraigned in Division 7 of Criminal Court. Billy Ray Turner, a Shelby County landscaper and church deacon, was indicted on first-degree murder charges and held on $1 million bond, which would soon be up to $15 million. The gun that had been found at the bottom of the lake was traced back to him. Billy was a deacon in Scherer's church and had done some yard work for the Wright family before Rumors had been swirling that Billy and Shara were actually romantically involved. This is breaking news. We are breaking into your regularly scheduled program with major breaking news related to the Lorenz-Ann Wright murder case. Another arrest, a second arrest inside of 2 weeks. This time, Lorenz-Ann Wright's ex-wife, Shara Wright, has been arrested. Fox 13 Zach Crenshaw has been following this story for us all night. He has got the details in our breaking news center. Zach, what can you tell us? What happened this evening and where, more importantly, Riverside, California? Daryl, we have just learned in the last 15 to 20 minutes that Shara Wright, the ex-wife of NBA player and Memphis basketball star Lorenz-Ann Wright, was arrested in her Riverside home. This comes after Billy Turner was arrested last week. This is a major development that the district attorney's office and the Memphis Police Department have been working for weeks, months now trying to lead to this arrest. Of course, many people suspected it when Billy Turner was arrested last Tuesday for first-degree murder. In his indictment, the district attorney says it was premeditated. They would not comment on other suspects though because they said the investigation was ongoing. Now, we know why, because Shara Wright was also a suspect. We learned last week and we have told you as we have continued to follow this investigation that Shara Wright and Billy Turner knew each other well. They were friends on Facebook. They attended the same Kearville church. And now it appears that police have enough evidence to connect both Billy Turner, who you see on your screen right there, and Shara Wright, the ex-wife of Lorenz-Ann Wright. 4 days later, Shara Wright Robinson was also arrested in California and would be held on a $20 million bond. While a lot of people were left shocked that Lorenz-Ann's ex-wife could be involved, those close to Lorenz-Ann said this revelation came as no surprise. Officers believed that Shara had tried to kill Lorenz-Ann before. And according to Jimmy's statement, this happened when Shara went to Atlanta to see Lorenz-Ann. While she was in his home, she had left a window unlocked with the intent of Jimmy and Billy entering the home at night and killing him. According to Jimmy, this is exactly what he and Billy did. As they opened the window and crept inside, they noticed Lorenz-Ann's roommate, Michael, happened to be asleep downstairs. They also realized that Lorenz-Ann was not home. The pair quickly left and a new plan was laid out. According to everything police knew, Lorenz-Ann was somehow lured into the grassy area where he was met with Shara and Billy. Officers felt strongly that they could put Shara at the scene, but it remains unconfirmed as to whether or not she pulled the trigger on either gun. After he had been killed, Jimmy said the pair confessed to him and he said he would help them clean up the crime scene. Jimmy said that he used a metal detector to help find one of the guns that had been dropped in the commotion. And after Jimmy and Billy cleaned everything up, the gun was thrown into the lake miles away. A trial date of September 16, 2019 was set for both Shara and Billy. They were expected to be tried at the same time as co-defendants. We also learned new information about potential holes in the state's witnesses and how the defense plans to attack them. Shara and Billy's defense would center heavily around Jimmy's credibility as a witness, with Shara going as far as to claim Jimmy had more evidence pointing to him as the killer than she did, and both legal teams saying that Jimmy's violent history was enough to prove that he himself was probably behind all this. When Billy was arrested, he had a gun on him, so he still had the charge of an illegal possession of a firearm hanging over his head, as well as the first-degree murder charge. The firearm charge alone carried a potential sentence of up to 20 years. Billy and his lawyer decided it was safer to plead guilty to the firearms charge. After Shara's lawyers learned about the plea, they started to worry that Billy and his team could use this as leverage to testify against Shara. Her legal team described this as being disastrous if it were to happen. After this, in an unscheduled court hearing, Shara walked into the courtroom. "That's right. Good morning. Good morning. I'm with Shara right before you. Come to the circle. Right here in Shelley County, Tennessee, and raise your right hand, please, ma'am. Leave solidly. Swear or affirm. Testimony. You can give the cause of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. LBI. Thank you, ma'am. Have a seat right here, please. Ma'am, watch your step. Please." She denied it over and over again for almost a decade. But today, Shara Wright reveals she knew all about the murder of her husband. Memphis basketball star Lorenz-Ann Wright helped plan it and was there to make sure it was carried off. Today in court, a shocking plea deal. Shara Wright pleading guilty to 2 charges, avoiding a first-degree murder conviction. Shara entered a plea of guilty to the lesser charge of facilitation of first-degree murder and the attempted facilitation of first-degree murder. She said, "I'm just going to say because of my children, I have made this decision, and because of them, I'm not going to go into many more details right now, but I'm just going to say everything is not what it seems." In exchange for her plea, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison and will be eligible for parole after serving 30% of her sentence, roughly 9 years. A possibility that left those who knew and loved Lorenz-Ann very upset. "Shara, I want to thank you for giving me my grandchildren. That's what I want to thank you for, but I want you to unlock them so I can visit them so they can see their grandma. So, if they didn't keep calling, she wants to come make chicken and dumplings. And the twins are going to be playing basketball next month. So, we want to see them, too. We want them to be talking. Let them know we didn't do anything to them. We didn't lie to them or anything. We just love them. We just want to see them, that's all." Am I able to respond to that? Miss Gangula, do you want your client to say anything at this point, sir? No. Miss Wright has nothing to say at this time, sir. Ms. Miriam, I want to thank you. Oliver, thank you. Your founder, I want to thank you for your patience. I want to thank you for allowing the legal process to run its course, Miss Miriam. And I hope, and I know what has happened to you and your family and your son can never be undone by anything that these courts do. But I hope it brings you some closure and I hope it allows your family to continue to heal, and I again thank you for your patience and we'll deal with Mr. Turner's case in September. Now thank you all for being in court today. Despite many pushbacks due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Billy Ray Turner was next to face the courts. He pleaded not guilty to all counts. Jimmy, who had been granted immunity along with many other witnesses and experts, took to the stand. Jimmy Martin says Shara came to his home to pick him up and get a metal detector days after her ex-husband was killed. She said she needed to find a gun. She said, "You know, the plan went through. Everything went through that. Night. What were you talking about? She had lost one of the guns. Yes, sir. You say you guessed. Why do you say you guessed? Because I wasn't there. Lorenza had his back to him. They started chasing him. They started firing at him, chasing him. He jumped through the fence. He was jumping like a deer. They caught him when he fell. She said. Both of them had a gun. She said whether or not both of them fired. She said both of them fired. Martin says days later. He and Billy rode together to get rid of the gun used to kill Lorenza, spotting a lake in Mississippi. Once we got there, we proceeded to get rid of the pistol. Tell me how that happened. Tell me who did what. Billy got the pistol out of the trunk, got off the ceiling on him, and threw it into the lake. And where were you when this was happening? I was right there beside him. But when the defense questioned Martin, they pointed out many inconsistencies in his story, and how details had changed over the years. He talked to police who was present when the guns were on the table. You in fact said you didn't remember if Billy was there or not. And then you said, well, it must have been there, because Sherry gave me Billy's car. Yes, sir. And you said that as a matter of fact, you described that this meeting was an hour or so long, but you had no memory of Billy being there. Correct? Yes, sir. The lead prosecutor, Paul Hagerman Ehrman, painted a picture of Billy as a key participant in the plan to lure Lorenza from his home. He did, however, acknowledge that Billy could have been left vulnerable to Sherry's manipulation because she was his trusted friend, an alleged secret love interest. Flare UPS between the lawyers and the judge in the courtroom would also happen on occasion. This is a mischaracterization. Mr. Perry, that's a proper argument. In your arguments, you may perceive Mr. I'm sorry, Mr. Perry. Can you say something? I didn't say a word. Mr. Perry, I told you about the attitude. You would not under your breath be disrespectful to this court, sir. You argued things. He has a right to ask around to overrule your arguments, but you can sit down and say, of course it is. I didn't say of course it is, Mr. Perry. It's a proper argument to your argument. You may perceive as that. Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the jury, Jeffrey Smith, is reporting to me that you have indicated you were all reaching a unanimous verdict on this case in all 3 counts of indictment. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Do any of your members indicate that you had not reached a unanimous verdict? Let the record reflect that all ladies and gentlemen of the jury indicate they have in fact reached a unanimous verdict on this case. Mr. Foreperson, can you hand the jacket to Jeffrey Smith for me, please, sir? Thank you, Jeffrey Smith. Mr. Billy Ray Turner, stand please, sir. This verdict reads as follows. State of Tennessee vs. Billy Ray Turner. Docket number 1705881. Count 1, first-degree murder. We the jury find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in count 1 of the indictment. Count 2, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The verdict reads as follows. We the jury find the defendant guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder as charged in count 2 of the indictment. Count 3, criminal attempt first-degree murder. The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the Defendant guilty of criminal attempt first-degree murder as charged in count 3 of the indictment. In March 2022, after just 2 hours of deliberations, Billy Ray Turner was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and attempted first-degree murder. He was handed a life sentence. Judge Lee Coffey, who had presided over everything, was praised for his work throughout the hearings and trial. With 3 different versions of events and one story that will never come to light, it is likely that the full truth of what happened that night, and the reason behind why it happened, will never be known. The former director of Memphis Police, Tony Armstrong, said, "The only motive is he was worth more dead than he was alive. These kids, they suffered. Not only was their father taken, their mother's gone, too. There are no winners." Lorenzan's pastor said, not only was he physically murdered, but his character was assassinated. "I want people to know who Lorenzan Wright was, the kind of human he was. Too many people bought into the lies. We're trying our best to cleanse the name of Lorenzan. Lorenzan's children still work to keep their father's name and legacy alive." Lorenzan Wright Jr. was a basketball player, too, and worked as a coach training high school students. Lauren Wright is married and resides in Charlotte, North Carolina, and some sources say has the guardianship of her sister, Sophia. Lorenzan's twin boys, Lamar and Chamar, are also basketball players, playing for the Sue Edwardsville Cougars in the NCAA. Little is known about Lorenzan, apart from the fact he resides in Texas and supports his siblings in everything they do. They all believe their mother's innocence, and they remain a tight family unit. Sadly, the relationship between Deborah and her grandchildren became distant after the arrest and conviction of Shara. Deborah has since reconnected with Shemar and hopes one day to gain back the closeness with her other grandchildren. She said for now she will love them from afar. Her sister reunited with Lorenzan's son after nearly a decade apart. "Man, it's just a lot. The process, a lot going on. I don't know. I'm still processing it all and still trying to take it all in." Despite his mom being incarcerated and his dad no longer alive, he has not let his circumstances define him. Always moving forward, always pushing forward is something that I'm pretty much focused on. You know, everything happens for a reason and I live by that. So, I just keep on trying to shine a light on. You can make it through bad things. We got to get together, you know. Because as a family, that's what he would have wanted. His kids with his mama, you know, this is what we do. Reporting in Memphis, Jordan James, WREG. Lorenzan's parents were such a driving force in pushing the case and continuing to keep their son's story alive in the media. "I knew I couldn't give up," Deborah said. "If I gave up, who's going to take my place?" Story 6. According to official figures, more than tens of millions of people go missing every year around the world. About a third of them are found alive and unharmed. Almost half of them are found after a while dead as a result of accidents or murdered, and about 2 million people disappear without a trace every year. The latter are usually found neither alive nor dead even after many years. The story of Agnes Cleovina made a lot of noise in the fall of 2014 when a young and very attractive woman who was having fun in a club with friends as if vanished into thin air. Everyone who might have been involved seemed to escape any responsibility. However, In 2023, 9 years after the tragedy, the case took a completely unexpected turn. But let's get to the bottom of it. Who is Agnes Kleovina? Our today's heroine was born in 1984, July 8, in the capital of Latvia, the city of Riga. She grew up in an ordinary family and became the youngest of 2 daughters of her parents. Agnes' own sister, Greta, was only a couple of years older than her, so the girls were always very friendly and almost inseparable. The parents did their best to give their daughters a good education and let them realize their dreams. Agnes grew up a sociable, cheerful, and very active girl. She did well at school, played sports, and had a lot of friends. In the future, she dreamed to connect her profession with tourism or entertainment because she loved to travel and knew how to organize perfect leisure time. In addition, Agnes also had a bright appearance and a spectacular figure, so men always gave her their attention and compliments. The girl from a young age has always had a lot of admirers who in every way to get her attention. After graduating from school, Agnes worked for some time in the service industry while attending language courses and studying to be a tourism manager. At the age of 20, she decided to move from her native Latvia to the foggy Albion and settled in London. She believed that here she would have more prospects and opportunities to unlock all her potential and talents. Parents and older sister did not oppose her decision and sincerely supported. Soon after the move, the beautiful blonde met a young man whose name was Michael Mills. He was older than Agnes by 8 years, had a good education, owned his own thriving business, opened a small movie theater and entertainment complex, and was considered a very successful man. He and Agnes quickly found a common language, and soon began dating. Michael wooed Agnes beautifully, gave expensive gifts. Together they traveled and made far-reaching plans for their future together. The couple was truly in love and happy. It seemed that a long and prosperous life awaited them. According to the memories of those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She seemed to glow at the sight of her chosen one and dreamed of becoming his lawful wife soon. In 2014, Kleovina was offered a 3-month labor contract as an administrator in one of the largest and most popular nightclubs in the Spanish resort town of Marbella. Naturally, this job implied a temporary move to another country. But the ambitious and purposeful young woman did not want to miss this opportunity at all. Michael could not give up everything and go to Spain with his beloved because of his job, but he was not against her signing the contract. For Agnes, it was a great opportunity to try herself in a new field of activity to gain invaluable experience and perhaps further move and develop in this direction. It should be noted that Marbella is one of the most famous and attractive resorts on the Mediterranean coast. Here come vacationers from different parts of the world, mostly wealthy people who go to have fun and spend money. Here you can often meet show business stars as well as famous athletes and businessmen. Kleovina, who has always been very sociable, liked working in such a place. Before moving, she visited her family in Latvia and told them that she had signed a favorable employment contract for 3 months. She also shared another piece of good news. After returning to England, she and Michael were planning to get married. Dad, Mom, and sister were genuinely happy for Agnes and wished her luck. At the end of May 2014, Agnes Having packed only the most necessary things for one season, went to work in sunny Spain. Her lover stayed in London. But they called each other daily and communicated via video link, telling each other about everything that was happening to them. Cleovina actively maintained her pages in various popular social networks where she posted daily photos, small videos, and stories. She got a lot of followers who closely followed her activities and work. It was obvious that Agnes lived an interesting, busy life and enjoyed every day. After the end of her employment contract, Agnes decided to stay in Spain for a couple more months. It was the beginning of the velvet season in the resort, and during this period, it was possible to earn good money. She consulted her boyfriend and he supported her and promised to visit her for a few days because they had not seen each other for a long time and missed each other very much. Agnes almost immediately got a job as a hostess in a high-end restaurant and renewed her lease. In September, as expected, Michael visited her. They were having fun planning the upcoming wedding and choosing a place to go on honeymoon. Less than a week later, the young man returned back to London and Agnes had to work in Spain for another month, after which she was going to visit her relatives in Latvia and then fly to England to her lover. But these plans, alas, were not destined to come true. On September 6, Agnes, in the company of her friends, went to one of the popular nightclubs in the region, the Costa del Sol. A few hours before, she had called her fiancé, who was aware of her plans and did not object to Agnes having fun with her friends. The young people enjoyed themselves and took pictures together, and Agnes posted several of them on her online profile that night. According to the memories of those who saw her that fatal night, the bright blonde was wearing a spectacular short dress and carrying a tiny white clutch handbag. Toward morning, when the friends were about to go home, Agnes said she planned to stay a little longer and then take a cab. She was always quite serious and responsible, and Agnes had not had much to drink, so her companions saw no reason to worry. At that moment, when the friends said goodbye and headed for the exit, Cleovina was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail and was clearly trying to win Agnes' favor. After that night, Cleovina was never seen again, alive or dead. It seemed as if she had simply vanished into the crowded nightclub. No one could remember what time and with whom the blonde left the establishment or where she had gone afterwards. The next day, Agnes did not show up at work, and when trying to contact her, it turned out that her phone was switched off. Colleagues and friends were the first to raise the alarm, but the police were slow to respond to their missing persons report. Toward evening, a worried Michael called Agnes' mother and said that he had been unable to contact his fiancée all day, which had never happened before. The next day, Agnes' parents and fiancé jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report the disappearance. However, they were told that the relatives had to file such a report in person, otherwise it would not be considered. After these words, Michael and Clavin's family took the next flight to Marbella. In the end, the missing persons report was filed by the family only 5 days after Agnes had disappeared without a trace. The first thing that was checked was the apartment Agnes had rented, but it looked as if the owner had gone out for a while and would be back soon. Documents, money, and a few expensive pieces of jewelry were in their places. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared food, and on the bed were several outfits from which Agnes had chosen what to wear to the club on her last night. It was obvious that Cleovina had not been in her apartment since the day she had gone out with her friends. Her phone had been turned off. She had left no more posts on social media and she had not responded to any messages. It was only then that the police began investigating the disappearance, but precious time was irretrievably lost. Agnes' friends and family began to post flyers all over the city with her picture and requests for help in the search. The story was also picked up by the media, featured on television news programs, and Agnes' pictures were on the front pages of local newspapers. The first leads and clues emerged after the police studied the footage from the CCTV cameras located inside and outside the entertainment venue. However, there were also some problems with this because all the files had already been erased by that time and the police had to ask for help from specialists in order to restore them. But the efforts were not in vain. And on one of the recordings, made by a camera located at the exit to the parking lot, it was seen how Agnes around 6 o'clock in the morning leaves the club with a man and does it clearly not of her own free will. This last footage, which showed Cleovina alive, was to be studied in detail, but the closer the experts looked at them, the more frightening they seemed. Agnes was being led by a man of large build and it was obvious that she was walking with him under compulsion because he was holding her tightly by the waist. Agnes looked frightened, tried to break free several times and said something emotionally. But her companion persistently led her to the parking lot where he literally forced her into his Mercedes A63 with tinted windows. At the moment when the big man was pushing her into the cabin, it was visible that another man was already inside. While the first man was heading for the driver's seat, Agnes managed to open the car door. After which she tried to get out and escape, but at that moment, the doorman who was standing next to her came up and the driver gestured and said something. The doorman pushed Agnes back into the car, after which the driver handed him something, apparently a cash reward for his help. About 6 minutes after Agnes was in the car, her phone was switched off and was never switched on again. It was also impossible to trace the further movement of the vehicle because there were no CCTV cameras along the way. It became obvious that the men who were in the cabin were the last to contact the missing beauty. Surprisingly, the case was given a high level of secrecy from the start. Everyone involved in the investigation signed non-disclosure documents and information was not only kept out of the press, but even Agnes' loved ones were hardly ever given any information. For the first few months, parents and fiancé were kept in the dark. They were only told that the investigation was underway and that it was too early to draw any conclusions. But judging by the fact that Agnes had not given any information about herself during this time, there was little hope that she was still alive. Michael periodically gave interviews in which he asked for help in finding his fiancée. But no one ever responded to his requests. Only 6 months later, the relatives were shown the very footage from the club cameras, as well as the names of all 3 men who had last contacted Agnes. The large man who had forcibly taken the young woman out of the club and pushed her into the car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a well-known British millionaire and a very powerful man. In the passenger compartment of the car sat his longtime buddy named Craig Porter, who had no particular occupation and was periodically on the police's radar. The third was a dark-skinned doorman whose name was Ian Usman. Porter and Usman stated unanimously under interrogation that they were innocent, that Agnes had gotten into the car voluntarily. According to Capper, he and a friend spotted the beautiful blonde in a club and approached her to get acquainted. She was allegedly already pretty drunk, which contradicts the testimony of her friends, but didn't refuse a drink when they bought her a drink. Wesley then proposed to continue the party at his luxurious house in the country, to which Agnes agreed. Already in the car, Agnes allegedly changed her mind about going to the private party at Wesley's house and asked to be dropped off in the middle of the road, saying she would take a cab and go to her home. The man claimed to have dropped the passenger off where she asked, which was an unlit stretch of road that soon turned out to have no CCTV cameras either. But Craig Porter could neither confirm nor deny the words of Wesley Capper because he himself, according to his confession, was also very drunk and did not even understand when and how Agnes was in their car. Moreover, he stated that he fell asleep as soon as they drove away from the parking lot. And when he woke up, the young woman was no longer in the cabin. The third suspect, the doorman, C. Ian Osman, also said that Agnes Cleovina was drunk, but could not answer the question whether she had gotten into the car voluntarily. He did however confirm that when the car touched down, the blonde opened the door and almost fell out as she was driving. Then the doorman, at the request of the driver, slammed the door, for which he received a substantial tip. When Sean Osman was asked whether he thought it was strange that the woman had tried to escape by jumping out of the car while walking, he said he didn't think it was an escape attempt. In his opinion, she could have accidentally opened the door because she was intoxicated. He also added that Agnes did not scream or ask for help. The footage clearly showed Wesley Capper forcefully leading Agnes to the car, holding her by the waist and wrist. Wesley's defense was that Agnes was dizzy and he was holding her down so that she would not fall. Sometime later, the investigation came across another curious but also strange and frightening video, which was made in Sarand in the south of Spain in the port of Porto Dua. The luxury yacht of John Capper, a millionaire who was the father of one of the suspects, was moored there. The footage, dated September 10, 4 days after Agnes' disappearance, shows Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding the yacht. They were carrying a large suitcase, which judging from the footage was quite weighty, as well as a rolled-up carpet. When the company returned to the port of Porto de Dua a few days later, they had no luggage with them. After the footage was shown to Capper, he claimed that he and his friends had sailed to Ibiza to have fun. The suitcase, he said, contained their belongings, and what the investigation mistook for a carpet was bedding. Where it all subsequently went, he could not explain. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and automobile yielded no results. As it turned out, both had been cleaned and dry cleanoned, destroying any traces of DNA. However, a long blonde hair was found in the trunk of the car, but it was not possible to establish its origin because this crucial evidence mysteriously evaporated during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution told another curious detail. As it turned out, a few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper called the emergency services several times, but each time he dropped the call without waiting for an answer, as if he was afraid or doubted the correctness of his actions. The man himself explained that he was drunk and made the randomly. The lawyer for the Clavin family stated that Agnes, in his opinion, was long dead and that her body was resting somewhere on the seabed in the very suitcase that the suspects had brought aboard the yacht. In addition, he believed that the case was deliberately delayed and the criminals had plenty of time to get rid of all the evidence that could prove their guilt. Only a year and a half after Agnes' disappearance, Capper, Porter, and Usman found themselves in the dock. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to the lack of evidence, there was nothing more to charge them with. Moreover, the millionaire and his friend were released on bail and quietly left the courtroom. Naturally, Agnes' relatives were outraged by this, but the judge was adamant. All three men were only brought to trial again in 2019, almost 5 years after Agnes' disappearance. They still denied their guilt and insisted that Cleovina had gotten into the car of her own free will. The prosecutor asked that the doorman be considered an accomplice to the crime because he helped the defendants drive the victim away. Usman could have received a sentence of 5 years in prison for his actions. In response, he made a fiery speech in which he said that he was among the suspects because of the lack of opportunity to hire a good lawyer because all the money he earns he sends to a starving family in Africa. Capper and Porter's lawyers insisted that their clients were guilty only of persuading Agnes to get into the car, but not of forcing her to do so. In their opinion, the young woman was dropped off on the road as she had requested, but while she was waiting for a cab to go home, she could have been kidnapped and killed by third parties because Agnes was drunk and could not offer much resistance. The verdict of the judge surprised and angered the relatives of the missing young woman because none of the defendants, in fact, was not punished at all. Usman was cleared of all charges. Capper was sentenced to 2 years for taking advantage of Agnes' drunken state to persuade her to get into his car, and Porter received 6 months for complicity. In reality, the men received suspended sentences and did not spend a single day in prison, but paid Agnes' family the ridiculous sum of £10,000 in compensation. Clavin's family were discouraged by the decision and appealed. And then it turned out that both defendants in the case, while waiting for the court's decision, managed to break the law once again. Capper, being in a state of alcoholic and drug intoxication, knocked down a woman to death and fled the scene. And Porter and his friend, also drunk, stole a car, having previously beaten its owner to a pulp. But even for this serious crime, Capper was sentenced only to probation thanks to the brilliantly built defense of his lawyers. He paid a large sum in compensation to the family of the woman killed under the wheels of his car, and he himself remained at large. Porter was less fortunate this time and he still went to jail, but there is no information in public sources about the sentence he received. In 2021, almost 7 years after Agnes's disappearance, the main suspect in the case was punished. Wesley had been living an immoral lifestyle all this time, abusing alcohol and illicit substances which had severely compromised his health. At the height of the COA pandemic, he found himself in a hospital bed. And when he thought he had conquered the disease, he suddenly had a stroke. Capper died on July 26, 2021. In his 44th year of life. At that time, Agnes' parents filed another appeal with the court, but now the suspect can no longer be prosecuted because he is dead. No matter what the Supreme Court decides. In this difficult case, an unexpected twist 9 years later. Although Agnes Cleovina was never found dead or alive, she was still presumed dead sometime later. Her parents, sister, and fiancé agreed with the lawyer's version that the criminals had placed Agnes' body in a suitcase, which was subsequently loaded onto a yacht and dumped somewhere on the high seas so that it could not be found. However, in the summer of 2023, 9 years after Agnes disappeared without a trace, the case took an unexpected turn. So, in mid-June, a gardener of one of the elite golf clubs, Laua, located in the Costa del Sol region cleaning the area, found a strange object near the coast, which upon closer inspection, turned out to be an old, badly damaged suitcase. The man did not dare to open it himself and called the police. Inside the suitcase, law enforcers found human remains. The examination showed that the bones found belonged to a young woman whose approximate age at the time of death was 35 years old. In addition, it was also found that the suitcase with the body inside had spent about 10 years in the water before it was brought to the shore. After comparing all the facts, the police hypothesis that the body found belonged to Agnes Cleovina, who disappeared 9 years ago. In order to establish this unequivocally, a number of examinations are required to compare Agnes' DNA with the remains found. At the moment, experts are working closely on this issue, but the details of the investigation have not yet been made public. If the suspicions are confirmed, it will be a reason to reopen the case and bring the surviving suspects to trial. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Cared. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.